you 2023. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much. I'll just repeat that. Welcome to the City of Santa Barbara Harbor Commission regular meeting for June 15th, 2023. My name is John Stedman. I'm the chair, and we will start off with a roll call.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner McCray?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Here.
Chair Stedman.
Here.
That's everyone. Thank you.
All right. Director Wiltshire, any changes to the agenda?
Chair Stedman, no changes. And just a reminder to those who are here for the cruise ship, it's item number 4, so we have a couple things to take care of before, but we'll get to it fairly quickly.
Very well. Is there any general public comment? Angela?
I'm not seeing any hands online, but if anyone would like to speak, they can indicate that by pressing the hand icon or raising their hand, and I'll let them know when it's their turn to speak. And for speakers in the room, I'm not seeing any for general public comment either. Still none online.
Okay, very well. Here's one slip. Okay. Vice Chair?
Great. Thank you, Chair Stedman. Yes, in terms of the work group reports, yeah, we have the results of some of the work groups and subcommittees efforts being discussed today. Item number 4 is the cruise ship, and item number 5 is the chartering and business activity permit subcommittee. And I believe Commissioner Nelson would like to speak on this one.
Yes, after reviewing this item and speaking with my colleagues, Commissioner McCray and Stedman, on the business activity report work group, I thought that I would briefly remind everyone or recall for everyone how we got here. In the September 15th Harbor Commission meeting, we were asked to look into a disagreement, a dispute between the parties at Santa Barbara Landing as well as a business activity permit holder, Santa Barbara Outdoor Adventure Company. At the time, we had requested mediation. We probably should have been more careful and said, let's just work it out. But the director's response to us at that time was he really didn't feel it was necessary to hire a third party to come in and do an official formal mediation. That was agreed to, and with that, he basically said that he had real confidence in the ability of the Harbor Commission and the Business Activity Permit Committee to address this policy issue and work with them and help them deal with it. And with that, Commissioner McCray made a motion that passed unanimously to establish the work group. We have met a number of times, and we met 2 times with the parties on both sides of the dispute. Things were going very well. In fact, at the last meeting, I made a point to praise the work of Caesar because I felt the work group was sort of homing in on a consensus that we could recommend to the full commission that could enjoy the support of not only the work group, but also the waterfront department. I'm a little bit confused now by seeing the item 5, which is a report by the waterfront department staff that asks comments before we have finished our work. So when I look back at the notes when the committees, the standing committees were dissolved into work groups, it was not meant in any way to diminish the stature of these groups. In fact, it was meant to strengthen them and give them more authority. But now I'm curious about the status of a work group and its responsibility to bring forth a recommendation to the full commission. So the committee welcomes your comments on the department's presentation tonight, but we also ask that you think about how you want the work groups to operate in the future. Because I remember Commissioner Cohen asking when we approved the dissolving of the subcommittees, was there going to be any kind of guidelines as to how we go forward with this? And the response by the city attorney was, in fact, yes, there was some work being done on that. And then I also remember Commissioner Anderson talking about the work groups could be formed whenever there's an item on the commission that we think the community has some real legitimate concerns about. So I came away from that meeting thinking that the work groups were not only being strengthened, but they were also being given some opportunities to be more efficient. So please comment on, in addition to the recommendations by the department, please comment on how you would like to see not just the business activity group respond, but also all of the working groups that we may provide direction to. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Yeah, and I believe we'll continue that discussion along with item number 5 on the agenda. Is there any other commissioner who would like to speak on behalf of any work group?
I would just like to reinforce some of what you said. I think in summary, you're saying that the item is premature for a policy motion. Is that correct?
Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because I thought we were trying to bring a comprehensive, fully vetted proposal. Some of the issues that were brought up the last time when we had an opportunity to review with the parties that were in the dispute, it was a contentious meeting, but at the end of that meeting, they actually started to have a good conversation and things were brought up. And I thought that part of our goal was to address the congestion, but also address this disagreement among our partners at the harbor. So yes, I think it's premature. I think we're moving in the right direction, and I hope we can get back on course and do what we were asked to do.
Okay, very well. There are no other work group reports, so let's move to the consent calendar.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 18th, 2023. And item number 2, proposed assignment of license agreement number 27013, Epic Cruises, Inc. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approve the assignment of license agreement number 27013 from Epic Cruises, Inc., doing business as Celebration Cruises, to Sagamore Stearns LLC for Azure Seas and Whisper.
Thank you, Angela. Commissioner Cohen?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I was reading through the Epic Cruises contract, and I had asked about this a little bit with staff. And it sounds like in the transfer of this license, there's also a transfer of a mooring or a slip. And that is not part of, that is not treated separately as a slip transfer. So I just wanted to clarify is that at all in conflict with any of what State Lands has recommended for us with regards to slip transfers or?
Commissioner Cohen, that's correct. We have a number of lease and license agreements that are for water space, so essentially slips, and this is one of them. So they're treated differently than our slip transfer policy, where like a recreational boat or a commercial fisherman would have a slip. They're actually leased water spaces, and so those are all handled under the lease or license agreement itself.
But it doesn't conflict at all with any of what State Lands has requested we do when it comes to transferring, because I assume that their license has to do with, using state lands. So I just wanted to make sure that we're not doing anything that's a conflict.
No, I think what you're looking in, what you're discussing is, so the leasing agreement is, or license agreement is all encompassing, so the value there is with the lease. It's a business license, so with a recreational user, that's like a permit, essentially.
Okay.
So no is the short answer. It's not in conflict with the state lands from what we've been told.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner McCray?
Thank you, and my comment is with respect to that, the Epic Cruises agenda item as well. I'm going to be supporting this. However, I want to point out that it appears that the transferee actually has never run a commercial passenger fishing or commercial passenger vessel. And I would like to suggest that staff keep a close eye on that performance, as we have upper-level management that may not have that much experience with, running those kinds of vessels. I would also like to point out that having somebody come in and take over a lease like that with no experience on those kinds of vessels has worked out well in the past. And I'd like to just mention that Fred Banco came in never having run a charter operation and became one of the foremost leaders in our harbor area. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowick?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to new business, item number 3.
Item number 3, City of Santa Barbara Emergency Response Plan and Emergency Operations Center Presentation. Recommendation, Harbor Commission receive a presentation from the Emergency Services Manager on the City of Santa Barbara's Emergency Response Plan and Emergency Operations Center. Receive information and discuss.
Chair Stedman, Harbor Commissioners, I'd like to introduce Stacy Rosenberger. She's our city's emergency services manager, so she's here tonight to enlighten us on our emergency response plan.
Thank you. Good evening. As Director Wiltshire said, my name is Stacy Rosenberger. I'm the Emergency Services Manager for the City of Santa Barbara. Our division is housed in the fire department, but I'm an emergency manager for the whole city. So, in the presentation, there we go. So I want to start with what is emergency management. A lot of people, when they hear emergency management or response, think of our first responders, which are definitely a part of that. But emergency management really is the process that focuses on the framework that we create to manage those responses. Response is one part, but there are 4 other phases to it. We have mitigation, preparedness, our response, and our recovery, and that is a continuous cycle that we are constantly going through. For example, we had our January storms. We responded. We are now in recovery, and we are making changes and mitigating as we prepare for our El Nino that we are currently in. And really, we do this to reduce vulnerability to hazards within the community and cope with disasters that we're going to have more frequently. Having this framework is very important because it helps the city identify and plan for potential risks and vulnerabilities within the community, coordinate all of our various departments and their responses and the agencies so that we can avoid duplication of efforts, as well as establish a timely response when that disaster occurs. So what is the Office of Emergency Services? We are a very small but mighty division, like I said, in the fire department, but we're here for the whole city. Our main role is coordination and collaboration. And we do that by doing a few different things. We do a lot of our collaboration in blue skies. One of the main sayings in emergency management is, I don't want to be meeting you for the first time during a disaster. We want to make those relationships ahead of time, and we want to have coordination with our departments and agencies within the community prior to that disaster response, so we know who to call and talk with when we need to respond and coordinate that response. So during our blue sky times, we focus on developing and updating emergency plans and processes with the help of our department and community, building relationships within the city departments and outside agencies, training our city staff in their roles as disaster service workers, as well as our very active volunteer cadre, and also educating our community. Our division offers a variety of community education and preparedness programs, including our Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, and our LISTOS program, as well as general disaster education programs. And we have a very active public education and outreach coordinator who is currently graduating 15 people in our first advanced Spanish CERT Academy tonight, which is an amazing thing, all done in Spanish, fully translated, so we give her kudos for that. And so these education programs really inform our residents of preparedness efforts that they can take to be prepared when we have a disaster. This means that if they're prepared, they can help their community, they can help their neighbors. That's less individuals that our first responders have to assist, and makes us a more resilient community overall. And then we also have our disaster and response recovery, which unfortunately in the city of Santa Barbara can be quite frequent. We activate our EOC at a level 3 at least once a year, if not more. And then also when there's additional disasters that affect the county, we could also activate then as well. And really during that time, I take on the role as the EOC manager, and we focus on life-saving measures when our EOC is activated, making sure our city gets back to basic services and really accurate documentation so we can get cost recovery from our disaster response. So we have a few plans that help us build this framework. Our main overarching plan is our emergency operations plan, and that is updated or reviewed and updated every 2 years or after we have a large incident such as the January storms. We'll be working on doing that update. The emergency operation plans, or as we call it, the EOP, guides our response and recovery efforts during our emergencies by outlining the roles, responsibilities, and procedures of the various departments and agencies that we work with for response and recovery efforts. It also identifies hazards, response and recovery strategies, and establishes the coordination and communication processes that we utilize in our Emergency Operations Center. This plan is developed with input from all the city departments and other partners within the community, and reviewed by our County Office of Emergency Management on that 2-year basis. We also have additional plans and guidance documents that work in conjunction with our overarching EOP that are tailored to address specific aspects of emergency response. And our departments also have their own response plans that they are in charge of, and that my office assists them with reviewing and developing. One of the plans I want to touch on specifically is our local hazard mitigation plan. It was just updated and did a full comprehensive update, which we do every 5 years. And that really feeds into our emergency operation plan, as well as other plans within the city, like our general plan, our safety plan. And it looks at our local hazards and vulnerabilities very in depth within the city. And that is an annex to our county's plan as well. So lots of work went in there with all of our departments putting in projects for mitigation measures that are available to address associated risks. So this could be projects that include like seismic updates to our infrastructure. We have a lot of buildings that are quite old that we need to do seismic updates on. Or it could be developing community resiliency hubs that will be utilizing. I think we have one that we're going to be doing at the East Side Library, actually. And then we have our tsunami response guidance, watershed response guidance, and debris removal plan. These all just dive a little bit more into specific areas of emergency planning and response and recovery. For the state of California, we work under the Standardized Emergency Management System, or SIMS, and this really shows how our local government responds to incidents. Disasters start locally, and so they start in our field with our first responders, and the local government, us, or the Emergency Operations Center, we help support that field, and information gets fed up from the field to our local government or Emergency Operations Center, and then as the local government, we feed that up to our operational area, which is the county, to their Office of Emergency Services, and then that goes to our region, our state, federal. So it's a process where we feed up resource requests and information that makes it all the way to the federal level. It's not a perfect process, but it's what we have, and it makes it so that the state doesn't reach down to the field and ask questions, or the county doesn't reach down to the field and ask questions. We, as a local government, have jurisdiction for our response. They're there to help, but they're not supposed to come in and take over. So we have an Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, and here's a picture, I think, of our Public Works and Planning section within our EOC during the January storms. Our EOC operates really as our central coordination hub during emergencies. It can be in-person, virtual, or hybrid. We've done it all. But it really is it's one location where we can get all of our subject matter experts in the room. It is not my job as the EOC manager to know exactly what we need to do. It's to pull all those people together to work the problem and to answer the questions and gather the information that we need. We're also there to implement local EOP and supporting plans, identify and resolve any resource shortages or issues we may see. A huge part of our Emergency Operations Center is providing public information. We've seen how much public information is needed, and I think our team does a great job with providing it bilingually across all platforms. During this January storm, they did an amazing job. And then we report up to the county and state additional information as well as resource requests or any resources we may need. The EOC can be activated for a variety of disasters, but it's really activated when support is needed by a response or field crews. This doesn't necessarily have to be our first responders. It could be a department operations center that is heavily impacted and they need that additional support. And it's due to a depletion of resources, and that could be staff, it could be resources that are needed. And it's activated by our Director of Emergency Services, which can be our city administrator, assistant city administrator, our fire chief, or our police chief. We have a couple levels of activation that it can be activated at. We have our level 1, which is full staffing, level 2 or level 3. This allows us to expand and contract our staffing as the emergency or incident changes. So for example, during our January 9th storms, we started out at a level 1 because we knew so much rain was coming and we were concerned about road closures. So we did level 1, get people in the room. If we need to downgrade, we can downgrade, but they're at least here and able to do the work. And then as we continued on and moved into recovery phase, we downgraded to a level 3 and then we deactivated. Here's just a quick look at our Emergency Operations Center's org chart. This is what it would look like if it's fully staffed. You'll see that we use the Incident Command System, or ICS system, which is utilized across the country and really globally for emergency management. And our city staff, who are disaster service workers, and some volunteers staff the EOC when needed. And they may be serving in a regular position that they do, such as if our waterfront branch comes and serves, that may be a position that they do. But however, we could have individuals doing work that is not their normal job. For example, in the planning section, we can have a variety of staff from different departments, from the library, from IT. It just varies. But this really takes away the day-to-day administrative structures and titles, and then it's broken into our different sections, which are management, which are the leaders. Our operations, they're the people that do it, or the doers, which is where our waterfront department sits as a waterfront branch. They're their own branch there. They can also have their own DOC activated at the waterfront that then feeds information up to the EOC. We have logistics, they're the people who get it. Our planning, they're really who tells everyone what we're doing and develops the plan. And then finance, they pay for it. So once we get through a disaster, be it large or small, we go into the recovery phase, but really our recovery phase, we try to start it right at the beginning of when we activate our EOC. We start planning for that recovery process and how we're going to start that rebuilding for our residents and for our city. And we have a couple different types of recovery. We break them into short-term and long-term. So our short-term recovery could be our rapid debris removal, cleanup of streets, removal of debris from the harbor, restoration of essential services like utilities, government services, health, and then damage assessments, which could include windshield surveys, damage surveys of impacted areas. And then our long-term recovery, which is what we are currently in for our January storms. We're, restoring, we want to restore our facilities to at least pre-disaster condition and potentially even beyond that with mitigation measures if possible. Assist with access to recovery programs, so that's for our individuals, making sure that they have what they need to recover the best they can. Big one, recovery of disaster response costs and improving our city's emergency operation plan and processes. We always conduct an after action following any time our EOC is activated to really look at what we did and what we can potentially do better for the next time, and capture those really good things that happened so that we can include them in our plan if they're not already there. So I know that recovery was a big question, so I got asked to talk on that topic, and so I'll dive into that a little bit deeper. For long-term recovery and for recovery of costs, we are lucky for these January storms that they have been they were a federally declared disaster, and with the Stafford Act that authorizes the president to provide federal assistance. And with that, we are able to then get reimbursement from FEMA for a variety of categories of work. So currently, we have 2 disasters that we have declarations on where we're able to get public assistance for. The first one is our January 9th storms, which you'll see up there as DR 4683. FEMA likes to use a lot of numbers. And then the second is from February 21st, and that is ongoing. So we had a lot of rain, which caused a lot of issues, and many of the counties and cities within the state pushed up to the state saying, they pushed information to the state saying that we are seeing this continued damage, that it's compounding, and we need to be able to do reimbursement as we see these additional storms coming in. State made the case to the federal government, and we were able to get added to that as a county. So we will be submitting damage inventories for that as well. So the process, as we move into recovery, we start to gather all of our documentation. We submit a damage inventory, which we did submit for the January 9th storms. And that is all of our city departments working together to gather all the damages. At this point, for the January 9th storms, we have submitted 52 different damage items with totaling over 14 million to FEMA. And we're working on getting documentation and getting those projects obligated by FEMA so we can start getting money. It's a very long process, very administratively heavy, and we're slowly working towards that process right now. Types of eligible work, just so you get an idea, it can include debris removal, emergency protective measures, so that's our staff that are out doing emergency protective measures during the actual response. Roads and bridges, so damage to our roads and bridges, water control facilities, buildings and equipment damage, utilities, parks, recreation, and other. Like I said, 52 different items are listed on our damage inventory, which is, I think, the largest we've had as a city. Other disasters, we haven't had maybe the same level of impact. So it'll be a long road to working with FEMA in this one, and we'll see how many damages we end up with in our DR 4699. It is significantly less, though. I want to end my presentation with just a little bit of a call for individual preparedness. We should all do it. So really encouraging all of you and everyone in the room, make a plan. There's great plans at ready.gov. Build your kit. Think about food, water, first aid, medication, your pets if you have them, documentation. Be informed. We encourage everyone to sign up for alerts at readysbc.org and to follow Office of Emergency Services as well as the city and fire department on social media. And then get training. We offer a variety of trainings, CERT, LISTOS, disaster education, and fire safety. And we'd be happy to do trainings for you. And that is it for me. Happy to take any questions.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for that great presentation. It's well thought out and answers a lot of questions that we might have. I have a couple of things for you. First of all, I'd like to point out that I think the mapping, the GIS part, is very, very important and part of the very first thing one should do to examine the extent of whatever is being considered to be an issue, a challenge for us. I noticed that it was the very bottom of column 2, so for me, I'd like to see that bolded and moved up the chain. I don't know, maybe just for effect, if anything else. I'd like to recall that the Refugio oil spill response was chaotic and contentious from what I saw, and I was on the outside. I can only imagine what it was like being on the inside of that, trying to get it organized, and dealing with the actually competition between the different responding parties. And I want to know if that's fixed. And then lastly, I'm really interested in whether or not, what our chances of seeing the $1 million+ we expended at the harbor to get some riprap put in and save the rest of the parking lot. What are the chances of getting that supported?
Okay, great questions. So in regards to the GIS, it's listed towards the bottom, but it is not, something that we take lightly. We love our GIS guys, and they do a great job, and we are trying to incorporate more technology into our EOC and into our damage assessment and planning processes. So it's a work in progress, but it's getting there. Refugio oil spill, there was a lot of competing agencies, as you said, with that. I think as a county, we've grown a lot since that. And we have a very strong Office of Emergency Management at a county level for our operational area, who is a leader for the county and for the cities in coordination. And so I think we're getting there, and we haven't really seen that level of fighting for resources or fighting for control with many of our other disasters that we've had.
And then the most important one, what do you think our chances of?
So we'll see. FEMA is, like I said, it's a long process. We asked when we would potentially see any money for our projects that are 100% complete. We can start submitting documentation and slowly get that back. They were even saying with those we wouldn't see anything potentially till September at the earliest, and that was them being very optimistic. Just to give you an idea, recovery, FEMA did its final closeout for the Northridge earthquake 5 years ago. So we still have FEMA projects from Thomas Fire and COVID right now that we are working on to get reimbursement from. So it's a process, and the better documentation we have and how quickly we can get that in helps with that. The city is working on getting a consultant to assist with that process that we will have for the next, I think, 5 years to help us so that we're not trying to do it just with our staff, myself and finance staff in our departments, but to do a little bit more of that coordination and documentation.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you were here to answer that question. We'd have been hammering on your door, next month.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes, you basically seem to be proud that you just finished your local hazard mitigation plan. And when I think of local hazard mitigation, I'm thinking hotspots. How do we prepare for the next atmospheric rivers, cyclone bomb, or in our case, a historic swell that closed our channels? Does the local hazard mitigation plan focus on city assets or facilities that need special attention? And if so, was the waterfront, which is completely owned, controlled by the city, was it one of the featured items in your mitigation plan?
Thank you for that question. So our local hazard mitigation plan, like I said, it gets updated every 5 years. It has a variety of projects on it, and each department is able to submit their projects based on specific mitigation priorities, and waterfront is in there, and there are projects in there. A lot of times we submit those projects and we say this is a mitigation project that we wish to do, but where do we get funding to do it? And so if you look deep into our mitigation plan, you'll see there's a long list of projects that are deferred or we're working on because of funding or their timeline is farther out. So a lot of times it's a funding issue about projects getting done, or prioritization, they're, a little bit further out. So it depends on the project, but all departments are involved in it and can provide projects to the hazard mitigation plan based on the hazards that are identified within the plan.
Are you suggesting that each agency, say the airport or the waterfront department, have to figure out how to fund the hazard mitigation recommendation? Or is it part of the city responsibility to say, we've got these 5 hotspots and we need to figure out funding for it?
It's a little bit of both, depending on what the project is. We do have ability to apply for hazard mitigation funding through the state when there is disasters. As a city, unfortunately, many times it's hard for us to get that because it's a very competitive process that the whole state is involved in. And many of our areas don't meet social vulnerability that we're looking to do the projects in necessarily, don't always meet the requirements that the state has. So other counties or cities may get that money first. So it's something we're constantly working on. There's a couple different funding sources, and it's something, we work with as all of our departments to see what we have. Mitigation measures can be also baked into departments' budgets, depending on what they're doing. It varies, yeah.
And finally, you had a list of eligible projects when you showed the FEMA slide, and I saw bridges and roads. Well, in our case, it's the channel coming in. So that's our road, and it connects to a recreational fishing and tourism industry as well as the commercial fishing industry. And so when that channel closes, that's just like blowing out a bridge or a road. So would dredging cost be in fact an eligible item?
Yes, that is an eligible item, and it is on the damage inventory, along with many of the other waterfront projects. I think there's a total of 10 projects from the waterfront and harbor on the damage inventory.
That's great. Thanks very much.
All right, doesn't look like there are any further questions from the commission. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to
Item number 4, Cruise Ship Subcommittee Update and Proposed Program Improvements. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from staff on the Santa Barbara Cruise Ship Program and the past year's efforts of the Cruise Ship Subcommittee. Discuss proposed improvements to the program and provide recommendations to staff for the Cruise Ship program going forward. Discuss and take action as necessary.
thanks, Angela. Director Wiltshire?
Yeah, good evening, Chair Stedman, Harbor Commissioners, and members of the public. I'm Mike Wiltshire, the Waterfront Director, and tonight we'll be presenting on cruise ships, a little bit of what we've been doing for the year, just kind of a general update, bringing it back to you all, to the full commission. I'm joined by not our new employee, but our new administrative analyst, Angela Rodriguez. She's going to be helping me with the presentation tonight. She's moved into Chris Bell's previous role, so she'll be very involved with the cruise ship program, so she will be kind of co-presenting tonight. First off, I want to thank everybody involved for this past year, namely the subcommittee. It really is, the public process is always more involved and longer than most think, and I just want to give kudos to the subcommittee for their professionalism, their care, their consideration of this topic. Huge appreciation to the public. That's kind of what this was all for, providing a venue for people to come and speak. And so we've had some really well-attended meetings and a well-attended meeting tonight. So thank you to the public. You guys are a huge part of this as well, and a huge place of where we gather information from to sort of guide this program going forward. And also big thanks to the technical experts that have supported us. Subcommittee's seen a number of technical experts, APCD, the Coast Guard, the cruise line industry themselves, and so we really went out and tried to get a broad swath of people from all sides of the argument, and we had some really informative presentations from technical experts who had a lot more information than us, which was the point of all this. So to start the presentation, we're going to do a quick little recap on the cruise ship program itself, and we'll kind of dive into what we've been up to over the last year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez for the first few slides.
Thank you, Mike, and hello, Harbor Commission. It's a pleasure to be here before you and on this side of the dais for a change to present to you in my new capacity. I'm going to jump right in and discuss the history of cruise ship programs in Santa Barbara. The program started in 2002 and is managed by the Waterfront Department. Since the start of the program, the Waterfront Department has hosted about 200 cruise ship calls. The Waterfront Department schedules the cruise ship visits during non-peak business seasons and therefore limits the visits to fall, winter, and spring to avoid the busier summer months when the city is more impacted by non-cruise ship visitors. Typically, the cutoff dates when cruise ship visits are not scheduled are between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Additionally, cruise ship calls are scheduled anywhere between 12 to 36 months in advance. The Waterfront Department website is also on the screen, and there you can find the schedule. Also on that website, there is the cruise ship line information, as well as other information. And the schedule gets updated just before the cruise ship season once the estimated time of arrival and departures are confirmed. And there are periodic changes to that as the arrival times change. This is a graph of the number of cruise ship visits that have occurred each year since 2013, and it also includes the visits that have been already scheduled for the calendar years of 2024 and 2025. As you may notice, in 2020, there were only 5 cruise ship visits that came to Santa Barbara, which was a result of the cruise ship program being halted due to COVID. While still being cautious, there were no cruise ships allowed in 2021, but the program did resume in 2022 after being discussed at City Council. There were more cruise ships scheduled in 2022 than other years, but that was mostly due to the built-up demand from the halt during COVID. This is a little bit of insight on how the cruise ship program works on the day of a cruise ship visit. The ships anchor approximately 1 mile offshore and tenders ferry passengers to Santa Barbara Landing. Santa Barbara Landing is an approved facility through the U.S. Coast Guard and creates a secure area for the passengers to disembark. Once the passengers are landside, they are greeted by volunteer ambassadors who provide them with a wealth of knowledge about the city, along with information about where they can eat, shop, and see other famous attractions that Santa Barbara has to offer. Some guests do have prearranged tours, but others are happy to walk into town and tour the city on their own or take advantage of the waterfront shuttles. In addition to the shuttles that are provided by the Waterfront Department, the city also provides security, and for larger ships, there's portable restrooms made available so that it doesn't impact the harbor bathrooms. To run this program, the department charges $10 per passenger, which will be increasing to $15 with the new recent budget adoption. Also, the department receives these funds per passenger regardless if the passenger gets off the ship or not. So each fiscal year, the Waterfront Department makes roughly $500,000 and has incorporated those revenues into the operating budget. In addition to the revenue the Waterfront Department receives, Santa Barbara Landing also receives approximately $250,000 per year, and those funds go directly to their business to offset the costs associated with creating the secure landing area for the passengers and for the loss of business space that is used for the day to support the cruise ship visit. For the business community, there is an annual impact of anywhere between $3 million to $5 million each year. Visit Santa Barbara is in the process of conducting a new survey, and they should be completed with it this year. Now I'm going to pass it back to Director Wiltshire to present on the cruise ship subcommittee.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. So as most of us know here, there has been a cruise ship subcommittee in place for about the last year. This is just a little bit of history on the subcommittee. It was formed on April 21st of last year. And since then, there's been 4 fairly well-attended meetings, all sort of dealing with slightly different topics. So the first meeting in September, we really just kind of recapped the cruise ship program, sort of captured public concern. In the December meeting, we had a pretty thorough presentation from Tim Mitro with the Air Pollution Control District. And then on the February meeting, we had the cruise lines themselves, so Cruise Line International Association presented, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard on regulations and enforcement of cruise ships and ocean-going vessels. And then most recently, we had a cruise ship subcommittee meeting on May 6th, and we May 16th, sorry, and we generally discussed improvements to the program and kind of what direction we would want to go with this. Next slide. So this slide was put up in the first cruise ship subcommittee meeting. It's kind of just a good way to recap on some of the general high-level objectives. So us, staff, and cruise ship subcommittee were really eager to hear from the public. So hearing public concerns, research, gather data that we didn't have as best we could, disseminate factual information, and provide access to information. So the waterfront department can kind of act as the resource to provide information as needed, improve transparency, not only with us, the waterfront department, but with the cruise lines themselves, and then do some evaluation to potential improvements to the cruise ship program going forward. So to date, over the last year, although it has been a year, I think we've done a really good job of keeping track. I think all kind of 6 of these higher level goals we've touched in some way. So I think we've been doing some good work at the subcommittee level. Next slide. So after gathering all the comments from the public, both written and in person, and just kind of generally throughout these meetings, the main concerns really got distilled down into 3 major categories. So the first being concerns with water quality. So there's a general concern with ships discharging gray water, sewage, wastewater in the channel or near Santa Barbara. And some general unclarity on our part and those involved on regulations, enforcement, and how ships' operating procedures with wastewater and discharge actually happen. And then there was kind of an overarching mistrust of the industry and concerns even if there are regulations, are they following them? And so that was it's a little bit harder to vet, but that was definitely a concern of the community. With respect to air emissions, similar concerns, so just general concerns with the air emissions produced by cruise ships, and an unclarity on the regulations and enforcement and how that works and what that looks like. The third general kind of comment or concern that we heard were really just the social impacts or visual impacts. And so that was kind of the increased tourism, crowding in Santa Barbara, and just a general concern with the way cruise ships look when they're at anchor. So that was really kind of captured the majority of the comments and concerns that we'd heard. Next slide. Just to recap a little bit on the regulation with respect to water quality and discharges, there's really one major overarching regulatory agency, so the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, under the Clean Water Act. And so they govern U.S. waters, which is typically out to 200 nautical miles. And they regulate all ocean-going vessels, so all registered ocean-going vessels, not just cruise ships. So this applies to cargo ships, large commercial fishing vessels, tankers, all that. Under the U.S. EPA Clean Water Act, so ocean-going vessels can discharge treated wastewater outside 4 nautical miles from the coast, and they can discharge untreated wastewater outside 12 nautical miles from the coast. And so these are the regulations that are occurring off the coast of the United States and internationally. And those, all of those regulations are enforced by the U.S. Coast Guard. One other layer is Santa Barbara is unique. We do have an additional layer of regulation. So that's established through our captain's declaration that's been in place for quite some time. And so we request that ships do not discharge anything within 12 nautical miles of Santa Barbara. So we essentially have an agreement, a form that we send to the captain of each visiting vessel saying that they will abide by these terms, which are in addition and above and beyond what the EPA and the state of California regulate. Next slide. And this isn't total encompassing, but these are some of the things that we learned about ocean or about water quality and cruise ship discharges. So learned that Santa Barbara is unique. So us adding an additional requirement on top of the EPA with respect to wastewater management is not common. Most municipalities, most ports, they kind of rely on the state and the EPA to set those regulations and enforce them. So kind of a good thing that we went above and beyond, and we've done that for quite some time. The majority, but not all, cruise ships have advanced wastewater treatment systems. And so advanced water treatment systems allow ships to do onboard processing and treatment of wastewater. So somewhat similar to a municipal wastewater treatment plant. A majority of cruise ships in the fleet possess this technology, and it seems that the industry is moving towards 100% compliance with advanced wastewater treatment. Really noticed that there have been big changes in regulatory requirements. So over the past 20 years, there's been increasing regulation and enforcement. A lot of this is mainly due to past bad behavior. So as with any corporation or industry, as bad things happen, they get further regulated and policed. This seems to be the case with cruise ships as well. When the Coast Guard spoke, they did express confidence that visiting vessels are complying with regulations. So that was good to hear from the entity that does the enforcement. Cruise ships are inspected regularly by the Coast Guard, and something that we learned is that the cruise lines who visit here do contract with third-party spill response contractors in the ports they are visiting, and that includes Santa Barbara. So they have third-party spill response capabilities kind of onshore at the ready, which was new to us. Next slide. So a little bit about the regulations for air emissions. There's really two governing bodies. And so CARB, the California Air Resources Board, regulates air emissions from 0 to 24 nautical miles out, and the International Maritime Organization regulates from 24 miles and beyond. From 24 miles to 200 nautical miles is a environmentally sensitive zone according to the IMO, and so they or emissions control area, sorry. So they regulate those at a much more strict level, and that is 200 nautical miles off the coast all the way up and down the U.S. coast. State of California is leading the pack. So California has the most stringent air emissions requirements, and so this really governs the fuel types that vessels use and the amount of emissions they are able to produce and operate with. Once they go beyond 24 miles, being that it is a emission control area, the IMO regulations for emission control area are similar, but not exactly to the CARB requirements off the coast of California. Next slide. So some of the things we learned about air emissions. Not going to say we learned this, but cruise ships are large emitters of greenhouse gases. Coastal U.S. and California definitely has the strictest air emissions requirements in the world. And in addition to the cruise ships that are transiting the Santa Barbara Channel, roughly 5,000 cargo and tanker ships pass through the Santa Barbara Channel each year. So just an enormous amount of ocean-going activity through the Santa Barbara shipping channel. Cruise ships make up about, or a little bit less than 0.5% of Santa Barbara County's greenhouse gas emissions. And the main source of Santa Barbara County's greenhouse gas emissions are from some vehicles and other ocean-going vessels. So those cargo, those tanker ships, and other vessels within Santa Barbara County. There is an existing voluntary vessel speed reduction program, and that mainly exists for cargo and tanker ships. And this is really in place to limit and minimize emissions and whale strikes. And so this is something that we looked at to attempting to have the cruise ships voluntarily comply with this as well. We also learned that the majority of ships use plug-in technology when in port. Obviously, this is not an option in Santa Barbara. We're a bit unique. We're a tender port, and so we just don't have the infrastructure for ships to come and tie up to port and tie into electricity at shore. Next slide. We did receive some really useful data from Air Pollution Control District, breaking down various categories of emissions from cruise ships. So we learned that not all emissions are the same. So cruise ships perform much more poorly in some categories than others. So with their worst emission categories being nitrous oxide and carbon monoxide. And so greenhouse gases are really made up of kind of a suite of all different emissions. And so this was the Air Pollution Control District provided us a real breakdown of each of those. So although they are large emitters of greenhouse gases, their overall greenhouse gas output is relatively small compared to the county's annual GHG emissions. And just for reference, so this data here provided from the APCD assumed 30 visits from kind of the larger cruise ships. So they took the worst case scenario or most conservative approach with ships visiting Santa Barbara. Next slide. We shared this earlier, and this is good for the public. I think it's a great resource. So there's a website called cruisemapper.com where you can specifically track cruise ships. You can click on the link, you can see where they are, you can see where they've been. It provides a lot of information about the ship, and so just a tool for transparency for anyone from the public at any time. We use it to kind of identify where they are. This map shows sort of the Pacific region, and it was taken a few days ago at 8 in the morning. The blue dots represent not only cruise ships, but all large registered passenger vessels. And so it kind of gives you a sense of the cruise ships that are out there. Next slide. This is also a really good resource, marinetraffic.com, and so this tracks all registered vessels worldwide. And so this is available to the public. Again, you can kind of click on any vessel, gather information about what the vessel is, where it's been, where it's going. And this is that website with kind of all of the other vessel types clicked on. So green is large cargo ships, red is large tanker ships, orange is fishing vessels, and the dark blue is, of course, passenger vessels, which includes cruise ships. So just put this out there to give kind of a scope and scale of the marine activity that's occurring in the Pacific Ocean on any given day. And so this was, 8 in the morning a week ago or so. Next slide. So a lot of effort to date. So we've had multiple well-attended public meetings, recommendations from Channel Keeper and Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, input from business community, Visit Santa Barbara and Chamber of Commerce. And again, I mentioned those technical presentations, which I personally thought were extremely valuable. And staff did make a site visit to the Port of LA. So we met with a number of the environmental managers for Carnival Cruise Lines, and we went down to Port of LA and toured the facility down there, kind of got down into the cruise ship and looked at some of these advanced wastewater treatment systems, how they manage it and how they run those ships and what their standard operating procedures are. Next slide. I'm not going to read all this. These were included in the notes, but these were recommendations that we received from Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. So there were kind of a variety of 8 recommendations to improve the cruise ship program. So yeah, it's really our goal to, and we use these in huge part to kind of inform what we were going to propose going forward. Next slide. And then so after all this, some of our proposed recommendations would be, and I broke them down in sort of categories, so some recommendations. And I want to preface this with saying that we would intend for these to be requirements of the cruise ship industry. And so our power with managing the cruise ship program really lies when they reach out to us to book. And so they reach out to us 12 months, 36 months in advance. That's the time when we can say yes or no. And so we've had a long-standing business relationship with them, and they have never balked at when we say no. If it corresponds with an event in Santa Barbara, a triathlon, something that's going to be busy, we just say no. So that would be the time for us to implement these. The intent is to make this a requirement at that time and say, okay, if you would like to book in 12 months, 24 months, here is our letter of understanding or our terms of agreement. If you can agree to this, then yes, you can visit. And so I know there had been some thought that these were intended to be sort of voluntary, but to the best of our ability, our intent would be to make this a requirement of visiting cruise vessels. With respect to water quality, so request that ships be equipped with advanced wastewater treatment systems by 2025. A majority of ships that are visiting already have them, but this would be kind of pushing that envelope a little further, continuing our local requirement of no discharges within 12 miles. With respect to air quality, so request that all ships reduce speeds when feasible to 12 knots or less. The idea is to try and get to the point where we just mirror the vessel speed reduction program. And I know there's a bill going through the state of California right now that is looking to implement this on all ocean-going vessels, so a voluntary program. So it seems like the industry is pushing that direction anyway. Although we don't have the ability to plug in at port, it is nice to know that ships have at anchor emissions control systems. So that is a technology that doesn't necessarily exist now, but sort of we would like to make a goal to push ships to use those emission control systems when they do exist or when they are technologically feasible. And continue our local requirement of no use of incinerators within 12 nautical miles of Santa Barbara. Scheduling, we've had sort of loose scheduling guidelines. We've never formalized it, so we would propose formalizing scheduling guidelines. What this would do is really curtail the amount of available days cruise ships could come, and that would inherently reduce the number of cruise ships that would visit. So prohibit cruise ships officially from Memorial Day through Labor Day, prohibit weekend cruises and cruise ship visits, and prohibit back-to-back cruises. Next slide. So in addition, we were hoping to implement some changes that really improve the benefit side of things, so the economic benefits to the city and community. So Waterfront will work with local businesses to improve awareness and accessibility to cruise ships. A lot of businesses that we reach out to just didn't have the awareness of cruise ships visiting. So for those who wanted to benefit, we would try and play middleman and make it more beneficial for them to benefit. We'd like to work with the cruise lines and the commercial fishing industry to see about serving local seafood on board cruise ships. I'm trying to make a partnership there. And working with cruise lines with students and youth to improve connections for education and career development. I believe historically they had taken either City College or some students out to cruise ships to culinary classes out there to look at their culinary capabilities on board ships. And then some specific actions the Waterfront Department can take is increasing our passenger fees from $10 to $15 to start improving that benefit to the city and the waterfront. This increase has already been proposed and approved by council as of last week. Implement minimum passenger count and visitation fees and cancellation fees just to kind of insulate us and ensure that the benefit is there for the city and the waterfront. A big one is we'd also like to develop a publicly available information resource, and so a lot of this is just getting information out there, transparency, who to contact, what the regulations are, and so us, the Waterfront Department, being the clearinghouse for that, and gathering all of that information, and information that's specific to cruise lines, specific to the program, but specific to Santa Barbara as well. And then finally, intend that this isn't a point in time, so we periodically review the cruise ship program to ensure that it's still aligning with evolving sustainability practices and where the industry is going. Next slide. So again, a lot of time's gone into this process on all sides, so I wanted to touch on a few key points and just a little bit more background. Again, firstly, it's intended that whatever these improvements are, to be a requirement of visiting vessels, really not voluntary, but a requirement. These were really all spurred by public process, so this came about from you all, the public, by hearing public and local nonprofits. So really, some goals on our end is to make sure that these requirements are quantifiable and practically assessed. It's ultimately going to be the Waterfront Department who is managing and implementing and enforcing these regulations, so making sure that it's reasonable and not too subjective, and so we're really looking for those things that are technology-based, where we can kind of yes or no. When they call to book, we can say yes, you have it, or no, you don't. So it's clear and it's administratively simpler. And then the intent is, I know there's a lot of opinions on all sides, but the intent is really to kind of balance the benefits and costs and to revisit this periodically. Next slide. So I believe this is my last slide. So where do we go from here? So this is back to the Harbor Commission. Up for your discussion, for your proposed recommendations, whatever the Harbor Commission wants to go with this. Staff's advice would be at some point, it would be good to provide an update back to City Council on the efforts and actions that have been happening here. I know they're curious, and it's nice to involve them and bring this back once we have sort of a more finalized product. And then ultimately, once we land on recommended programs improvements, that's up to staff, so we have to implement them. So this means revising our captain's declaration, letters of understanding, revising our fee schedules, and really putting those into place. And then we'll get started on kind of creating that publicly available information material and work with local businesses to bring them into the fold. And so with that, I will ask for questions and turn it back over to the Harbor Commission.
Thank you, Director Wiltshire. Public comment, Angela?
We do have a handful of speaker slips for people in the room, but there aren't any hands raised online at the moment. So if anyone online would like to speak, they can indicate that by clicking the raise hand icon, and I'll call on them when it's their turn.
No, I think we'll go straight to the speaker slips. And I will remind everybody who approaches the podium tonight to speak to the commission and limit your comments to 2 minutes.
So the first speaker in the room is going to be Ted Morton, followed by Art Lewitt, sorry, I can't, Jamie Diamond, Sean Hastings, and Lee Heller.
Good evening. My name is Ted Morton, and I'm the Executive Director of Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. We appreciate the work of the Cruise Ship Subcommittee over the last few months and staff to gather public input on the future of the city's cruise ship program. The meetings have been well attended. A great majority of the people who've spoken and presented want to see significant improvements to the program. Last month, staff presented these recommendations to the subcommittee. We think they have some small and some positive steps, and particularly on the scheduling adjustments. But we believe more can and should be done to be included in an updated cruise ship program. We would like to see more requirements and firm requirements rather than requests of the cruise ship industry moving forward. And we believe improvements are needed to reduce the risk and impact of cruise ships to the precious environment and the public health of our community, to better align with community goals and priorities, and to contribute to further national and international advancements in cruise ship technology and operations that protect the environment and public health. This would reinforce Santa Barbara's reputation as a leader, as a civic institution in environmental stewardship. Last week, Channel Keeper submitted a letter with our recommendations, and that's included as part of the packet. And I can summarize these in 4 big categories. First and foremost, we would like to see a reduction and a cap in the number of annual cruise ship visits to Santa Barbara. Second, to ensure that ships that visit Santa Barbara have state-of-the-art technology and a solid record of environmental compliance. Third, to support the federal agency's voluntary vessel speed reduction zone and speed to prevent fatal strikes of whales and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and maintain the community engagement in the cruise ship program by keeping the cruise ship subcommittee in place. We're committed to work with the city, its staff, and others on a set of recommendations that improves the cruise ship program. I'm happy to answer questions if folks have questions. This is my first time presenting before the commission, so I'm not quite sure all of the rules, but if there are any follow-up questions on the recommendations that we put forward, I'm happy to answer them as the best I can.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Morton, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yes, if there are questions from the commissioners, we'll take them after all the public speakers have contributed. Thank you.
Next speaker is Art.
Thank you. I just want, excuse me, I just wanted to support Channel Keeper's position and efforts on this, and also commend the commission for the mere fact that this has been reviewed in such painful detail on occasion. I think it's a real positive statement for the community. In terms of Channel Keeper's position, I think there's certain things like a record of compliance that should be sort of a floor. That if the cruise ships don't have a record of compliance at the level that we require, then I think that they should be banned from the opportunity of visiting Santa Barbara. Having run a small marina myself, I understand the economics of doing something like that is really difficult, challenging, and painful, but I would still encourage us to consider on an ongoing basis to review how many cruise ships are actually allowed in, and maybe some of that cost loss can be mitigated through other means. I do think Ted's suggestion of an ongoing review with keeping the committee in place makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you very much, Art.
Next speaker is Jamie Diamond, followed by Sean Hastings and Lee Heller.
Good evening. I am Jamie Diamond, CEO and manager at Santa Barbara Landing, representing 5 businesses and the facility that receives the cruise ship tenders and passengers. I'm just going to speak directly to the recommendations and improvements that Director Wiltshire spoke to tonight. As it pertains to wastewater, I believe addressing discharge, best practices, and setting goals in line with California's 30 by 30 and California Air Resources Board is the most helpful to all. 30 by 30, I think it's very important that we look to reducing any pollutants into our waters. That is going to be the #1 issue and threat to our habitats and ecosystems. So thank you for those recommendations. Vessel speed reduction, as Director Wiltshire also said, and I apologize, I kind of wrote this and then he gave his presentation, but, and I believe Mr. Hastings is going to speak to this as well. AB 953 is going into place, which is going to expand the vessel speed reduction zone to the entire state of California. And this is for these larger ocean-going vessels. And this will be a huge win to all our marine life out there. So thank you for including that and continuing to push for that. And then it's also important to note that this is in partnership with the California Air Resources Board, and as the presentation showed, they actually go out to 24 miles, not just the state waters of 3 miles. So any emissions reductions, things like that, of that nature, go through the California Air Resources Board, and they have very stringent rules that they're dealing with right now. As the facility security officer and receiving facility, I appreciate the scheduling improvements that are noted here. And then also from businesses, this has really been a great opportunity to collaborate and partner with other businesses and how we can build together. Thank you, and I apologize for taking extra time.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Sean Hastings?
Good evening, Commissioners. Sean Hastings. I'm with NOAA's Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, your friendly Fed in the audience today. I want to commend the staff and the subcommittee for some extremely thorough work. I also want to thank the Commission and subcommittee for accepting the Channel Island National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council recommendations and incorporating them. We have been working in this space trying to reduce the impacts of large ocean-going vessels on our vibrant marine life, at the same time trying to maintain vibrant marine commerce in the region. And my specific recommendation is there's a little inconsistency with the suggestion that these vessels slow down to 12 knots. Our recommendation and our program for the last 15 years has been 10 knots. I'm happy to go into detail on why 10 knots if the Commission is interested. But the federal government, including NOAA, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the Environmental Protection Agency, recommend that large ocean-going vessels, including cruise ships, transit at 10 knots May 1st through December 15th. So to maintain consistency and clear communication with the cruise ship industry, we think it would be prudent to align those speed recommendations to 10 knots. Happy to go into more detail if warranted. Thank you for taking our comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hastings.
And Lee Heller?
Thank you, Chair Stedman and Commissioners. My name is Lee Heller. I'm here obviously in my own capacity, but just to give you a sense of who I am, I'm the chair of the city's Creeks Committee, and I'm also a member of the APCD Citizens Advisory Committee, so I have a pretty deep commitment to environmental issues. I wanted to begin by thanking the Cruise Ship Subcommittee for their hard work. I also wanted to offer a correction that the state bill that Assemblymember Hart is carrying is a voluntary vessel speed reduction program. It's not a mandate. So we don't know what kind of impact or uptake it will have. I think as a Santa Barbara, I want to remind us all that we are the birthplace of the modern environmental movement. So we want to be role models for what we expect from cruise ships that come to our area. And I also want to remind us that even though cruise ships are a relatively small component, Santa Barbara County is vastly exceeding its greenhouse gas reduction goals, and cruise ships pollute twice as much as the equivalent number of car trips, as we heard at one of the committee meetings. So, and particularly here where they can't plug in, so they're running their diesel generators offshore. We can and we should do better. Mr. Wiltshire is saying that the staff recommendations are not requests but requirements. If that's the case, the language needs to change to reflect that, because I did a side-by-side comparison of the staff recommendations and what Channel Keeper was saying, and it looks very different. So requirements are great, recommendations are non-binding. And I would encourage you then to support the Channel Keeper and Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary recommendations. We aren't asking for a ban, just for a reduction in the number of trips and requirements that would improve the quality of these visits when they do come. I think it would be a great idea to use the subcommittee as an ongoing venue to refine those recommendations and to evaluate ship applications and schedules based on records of compliance as a former speaker recommended. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee. Are there any other online?
There isn't anyone online that has their hand raised at the moment.
Okay, very well. So we'll move to questions by the commission. Commissioner Nelson?
My first question is more of a process one. Does the membership of the subcommittee support the recommendations as they've been characterized by the department? I remember Commissioner Hanrahan, who was so instrumental in making this committee happen. He said that he had proposed guideline recommendations. So I guess I'm curious, did the subcommittee pass along those guideline recommendations and in fact endorse the work of the Waterfront Department?
I'm happy to speak to that. I had a few points that I may just get out all at once. The first one is echoing a lot of people's thoughts is that the public process through this has been very robust and impressive. I applaud everyone's efforts from all sides that have been a part of it. It's been a really impressive process to watch. Channel Keeper's initial points, I think, have heavily influenced what is currently in front of us, but I do agree there's an opportunity for slightly sharper teeth on some of the proposals there. But I also want to remind everyone here that one of our core functions up here is to promote access to the water. And it's a critical role that we have. I remember when we first started this process, we sat with a council member and he said, the harbor is a gateway to Santa Barbara. And so if we're going to limit that to some degree, it's really important that we do spend a large amount of time and effort really thinking about how we would do that. And also the fact that we do have the most control over cruise ships when they decide to visit us. If they don't visit us, they just cruise through and don't know the Santa Barbara Harbor's values or what we're looking for from them. So keep in mind that working with the industry in the long run is going to help us frame it the way that we'd like. And also the cruise ships are, as the slide showed, cruise ships are just kind of a drop in the bucket in the overall ocean traffic. So I know that seeing them in the harbor is a eyesore to a lot and a front of mind because we see them, but overall in the large scale of things, it's not as big of a role maybe as we may think visually. So my thoughts on these points is they have a lot of good merit to them, and I think we're headed in the right direction. I don't think it's a final bullet, a final point. I think what I would love to see, as I said, we've got a great feel from the public on what we need. I don't necessarily think at this point the next step is more public comment. I would love to sit down in front of a computer with a director, members of the commission, however many are allowed, channel keepers, and then also someone from Visit SB or the Chamber, and possibly the cruise ship industry, and sit down in front of a computer and really hash out each point. I think at this point we've gotten come really far, but the only way to really dial it in exactly and try to bring all the sides together is to sit down in a small group and have the experts really work through it. So that's my take. I think we've come a long way. I don't think all the points are there, but looking for your guys' feedback, obviously, as well. That's why we brought it here after a year.
Sure. And thank you, Chair Anderson. I was also a member of that it is the last subcommittee that we have for Harbor Commission. I think if you take the bulleted items, there's 17 bulleted items, and then I think you provided another slide that's reduced down to 7 proposed recommendations. I don't feel that, just to echo some of your comments and some of the public speakers' observations and offerings tonight, that this entire set of recommendations is fully baked to the point where we would make a wholesale recommendation to staff at this point. Commissioner Cohen?
I'm the newest member to the cruise ship subcommittee, and so I haven't really had an opportunity to engage in the recommendation process and give feedback yet. So I would definitely welcome an opportunity to bring these recommendations back to look at. We actually have 3 sets of recommendations at this time. We have one from staff, we have one from Channel Keepers, and we have one from the Sanctuary Advisory. I think those are the 3. Am I missing anything?
No, Commissioner Cohen, those are the recommendations that we've received.
Yeah. And so I'd like to look at those 3 and really understand them. There's some areas, I dug in today looking at all of the different pieces of the puzzle. I actually talked to Sean a little bit about the reduction in speed, or and I actually reached out to Greg Hart's office as well, who is in charge of, or is pushing the legislation with regard to ship speed, and it seems like we have a lot of irregularities there that we could easily rectify if we sat down and met with those different organizations in order to understand it better, and why we need to all be in alignment with what we're telling ships. So that was one piece of the puzzle. I also really want to understand closed loop scrubbers, open loop scrubbers, and hybrid scrubbers. It seems like that technology is being used in ways that could be very detrimental to the marine environment if we don't understand it. So from my perspective, I feel like we've had a really good start, but I feel like there is some work to do here on some of these pieces.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes, first I'd like to thank staff for the amount of work and research that went into that, and the clarity with which those results were presented. They're concise and quite clear, and it's quite impactful for me. The Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council provided us a letter early on. I think we've worked hard to think about those things that were within that letter and have addressed a lot of them. And I'd like to thank the CNM SAC for that letter. And then also Channel Keepers letter. It was also very well thought out, I thought. And there are a lot of good points that are in there. Mr. Sean Hastings' comment about the 10 knots, I think works well. I think it's a win-win. It fixes things so that we're all kind of on the same page, and I think it helps both our air resources, and it helps mitigate the potential for a ship strike on whales. Something that I've mentioned before is that, Santa Barbara has been a leader with respect to protecting environments, not only here, but nationwide. And we do a great job of it, and we've done a great job of protecting those things that make Santa Barbara such a beautiful place and a wonderful place to visit. But we have not done it without others' help along the way. I'd like to point out that the things that we depend on for our daily life, electricity, hot and cold running water, those things come by virtue of the help of other people that may not live in Santa Barbara. Most of them don't live in Santa Barbara County, but would like potentially to visit it at some point. And they share in what makes Santa Barbara beautiful. They generate the power that comes over the hill to us from other places. They take environmental risks to provide us the fuels that we still use to this day. And in the future, I expect that those same people will see a bigger impact with respect to renewable energy than we do here in the Santa Barbara area as we continue to protect those values which are so important to making Santa Barbara the beautiful place that it is. And I would hope that we would do our best to welcome those people who also have a vested interest in this wonderful, beautiful place that we live in. We would encourage them to visit and not put impediments in front of them. I think this cruise ship program is one of the ways that we can help those people come to visit and enjoy our beautiful town. And I'd like people to kind of bear that in mind as they consider what kind of requirements we would want to put on cruise ships and what the appropriate number of cruise ship visits might be. Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
This is to Commissioner Anderson and Cohen. I appreciated your comment about, sharpening the recommendations and things that you would like to accomplish as the new member. And I note that one of the recommendations that we received was to continue the work of this subcommittee. So my comment to the commission is that we do just that. And the next time we have a presentation that the commission and the committee are directly involved. So, and maybe we could even take as a first step, Lee Heller said that she did a comparison of the recommendations of the sanctuary and the recommendations of Channel Keeper and kind of put them into context with the recommendations of the department. That might be a good exercise to begin with for the continuing work of the committee. Thank you.
Very well. Commissioner Cohen?
I have a question for Director Wilshire. On the topic of scrubbers, I'm just wondering, when I looked to see, about how those work and how the increase in scrubbers has been within the industry, like this was the graph that I saw, which, shows that really just within the last few years, scrubbers are being used significantly more in order for ships to meet air quality standards. I'm just wondering if you have any idea how many of the ships that come into the port are using scrubbers, and if they're using closed loop scrubbers or open loop scrubbers or hybrid scrubbers or no scrubbers. If you have any information on that, or if we collect any information on that.
Yeah, Commissioner Cohen, good question. I don't. We don't know. I don't know that technological information, how many ships do have them. What I do know is the CARB regulations. So within California, they do have a requirement that ships are not allowed to use scrubbers to comply with emission requirements. So that may not mean that the ship doesn't have a scrubber, but when they're operating in California coastal waters from 0 to 24 miles, they're not allowed to use them.
But do they just go out of the 24 miles and then turn them on? Is that what they're doing?
That's their best practices. So again, that was like they said, the cruise lines that we spoke to said no, because it's not necessarily worth it for them to change over systems, and like they're not necessarily using bunker fuel when they're here if they're doing the majority of their cruise visits within the coastal US, because the emissions requirements are so strict. But they are a business, and so they will look at regulations and adjust their operations based on those regulations to operate within the law and however is economically feasible for them. So I don't want to speak for the industry, but we can certainly kind of dig and get more information about scrubbers and which ships have them, which don't.
Yeah, my concern was just that a lot of the public comment had to do with sludge that people had seen coming onto shores, or that they were swimming out on the beaches and that they would find sludge. And that seemed to be something that open loop scrubbers produce. So I don't know if everyone knows what scrubbers are, but it's where they basically spray the exhaust down to keep it from going into the air. It produces this very toxic, terrible sludge. And some ships just spray that right into the ocean. Some hold it and bring it into port with them where it is processed. And some ships just use cleaner fuels and don't have scrubbers at all. That's my understanding. So I think it'd be worthwhile to understand if they are using that when they get 24 miles out, or if they're using, what the technology is that they have on board, so that we are encouraging them not to just put that sludge into the ocean.
Correct. And then Commissioner Cohen, just a reminder that is a huge amount of ocean-going activity within the Santa Barbara Channel, so the shipping channel. And so these regulations apply to all vessels, not only cruise ships. And so one of the pointed questions to the Coast Guard when they were there, which I thought was really interesting and something we wanted to get to the bottom to, of kind of point blank, what do you think the likelihood of cruise ships discharging or violating these discharge regulations within Santa Barbara while they're at anchor here? And the representative from the Coast Guard was pretty clear with his response that it was essentially extremely unlikely. And so I don't know if there is a chance they anchor in fairly shallow water, so when they leave, their thrusters may churn up sediment, but the likelihood that they are actually discharging while at anchor here is seemingly really low.
That they wouldn't be able to use those. So this is just information for me to know. Like, I don't know if they can use scrubbers when they're in port or when they're out of port, but it does seem like that is a major piece of the puzzle that we should understand as a city and make sure that we are fostering good practices there and not, letting ships in that are doing that. When just in the basic information that I read, it seemed like cruise ships actually produce a tremendous more sludge than any other type of ocean-going vessel, and that in some ports that it was causing a huge increase in ocean acidification, which is obviously a big concern for anyone who wants to see a healthy ocean. So,
Commissioner McCray?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, I saw the images that circulated around about the time that we had a cruise ship here, and people were pointing to the stuff that they were seeing floating, the flotsam and jetsam, on the water as emanating from the cruise ship. And I don't think that case was made well. When I looked at it, it looked like the normal kind of stuff that we typically see after a heavy winter. And so characterizing that as coming from those ships, probably, it's likely an error, I think. Certainly we should keep track of what those ships put out, and I think Channel Keeper's efforts to sample waters is a good one and well worth doing. But I would hate for people to get the impression that material that they saw in those images was de facto sludge from a cruise ship. I don't believe it was.
Thank you, Commissioner McCray. Are there any other questions from the commission? Yes, Vice Chair?
Yes, I just have a question regarding the advanced wastewater treatment systems. I remember from one of the previous presentations that the waterfront actually got a chance to go and see those kind of in action. And so I thought that was a great thing that we took a look at. But my question is, in the presentation it said kind of like some cruise ships have this, and I'm just kind of wondering what that kind of is. Is that like, is the advanced wastewater treatment system like a new kind of thing, or is this something where like, maybe 5 to 10%, or is some like 50 to 75% have it? And also too, just is there a difficulty in actually making this a requirement for the cruise ships going forward, I guess, in 2025, 26?
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Stanwyck. I didn't know the answer to that either, and so we asked the industry that, and so they're moving that direction to the tune of roughly kind of high numbers, 60, 70% of ships have it. A lot of ships are being built now, and so the newer the ship is, obviously the more sustainable it is, the better the environmental practices are. So the answer in short is no. It seems that almost all of the ships that have historically visited here in the last few years have advanced water waste treatment systems. And so in making that request and checking with the industry, yes, there is some difficulty in meeting that, but 2025 gives enough of a runway for them to plan. The trouble is they book so far in advance, and so we somewhat want to honor that business relationship, but 2025 gives the space and time for them to kind of realize that and move ships here that do have advanced wastewater treatment systems if they need. So I think it's a good balance as a requirement.
Okay, great, thanks. I guess for me, just to summarize, I mean, I've personally been pro cruise ship. I've seen the benefits of it. I'm proud when I see them there, that they're visiting my home of Santa Barbara. But it really wasn't until recently where I actually attended these subcommittee meetings, either online or in person, and I heard the public comments and everything. So I thank everybody for their input on this, because I think really it has gone towards the actual goal of the subcommittee to begin with, which was public input, gather factual information, and really to better understand the cruise ship industry. So I think just the mandate of the subcommittee in itself has been kind of well received. But one of the things that I also want to remind everybody is, a lot of the problems of the cruise ship program comes from waste and trash and harms to the environment. But also, just a reminder, and in speaking from somebody who's worked on the budget subcommittee, and we've raised the fee for cruise ships going forward, is a lot of these revenues that are generated from this program, these revenues are going back to mitigate these actual problems that we're thinking of in the first place, like trash and waste and environmental things anyway. So I just want to remind everybody that that's the economic benefit of this program, is to help the environment in that way too. And also too, just as an example, for instance, I would challenge everybody to visit the harbor on July 5th, because July 4th is a huge party, big celebration, great community event. And it generates a lot of trash and a lot of waste and everything. But there's always people there cleaning up. We hire more people to come in and put more trash cans and to remove waste and to eliminate the damaging environmental effects. So that's just one example of how things like the revenue that's coming in to the harbor from an economical standpoint is mitigating these waste and environmental effects going forward. So I just want to remind everybody that, and we can't make everybody happy with these things going forward, but I think right now we have a really good compromise, and I really support these improvements. I think a lot of these improvements have been generated from the input we've received from the public, but in that same statement, I also want to say that I do support keeping the subcommittee in place to reevaluate yearly going forward, so we can make positive changes in the future. So, thank you, everyone.
So is that a motion?
Do we have any other comments or any other discussion?
Commissioner Cohen?
I don't know if I don't know if that was a motion or not, but I would like to see these recommendations go back to subcommittee. So I would like to see us to review these and, like Seth said, have him sit down and sharpen his pencil with Director Wilshire and with some of the other members who are bringing up good points. So I would hope that we have the opportunity to do that, especially when it comes to a few of the really glaring issues like vehicles, or not vehicle, the speed that we're going to be requiring of these ships or requesting of these ships. So that's what I would hope would be happening.
All right, so I'd like, Vice Chair, maybe you can clarify your point, and we can take a motion on that if you would like.
Sure. No, I totally agree with what Commissioner Cohen is saying. And in my perspective, I was assuming that by leaving the subcommittee in place, then that would kind of constitute the ability to reenact or reevaluate these, as you were saying, on an ongoing basis. So that's kind of what I see of keeping the subcommittee in place. So.
Commissioner Cohen?
Are you saying, though, to send these to City Council? I'm not sure I understand.
I think the prudent thing to do would be to have something to send to council. I just see, we could wait on it, but I think in my opinion, I would rather send an actionable item to council that looks like it's addressing a lot of these concerns that we've seen, and then having the ability to go back and reevaluate them really at any time going forward with the subcommittee still being intact.
I think this is the first opportunity that a lot of the a lot of us have been able to discuss the recommendations, and it's the first opportunity that the public has been able to actually get back to us on the recommendations. We have really good feedback here from a lot of constituents, and I would hope that before we move forward with anything, that we actually have an opportunity to review it one more time and to bring something that we feel is a more polished product.
Okay, so I'd like to give the vice chair an opportunity to actually articulate a motion and see if there's a second, and we can take a vote.
Yeah, I'm confident, that we would be able to reformulate any of these. And I don't see if we are in a rush to do this. If we're not, we want to go back and reevaluate, that's fine with me. So. Sure. Yeah, and also too, I would rather somebody from the cruise ship subcommittee make the motion. I think that would be more appropriate.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Adam just give us a little more time. I think we're really close
Absolutely.
to having it. I think if we sent this to the council now, it would it may come back anyway. And so I think it feels like we're about 90% there. One more meeting with a couple of follow-ups, I think we could really propose something that would really we'd be proud of.
Great, no, I agree, thank you.
So I guess in terms of a motion, the motion would be to continue defining our proposals before sending to city council and propose a meeting, continue our work. We'll leave it at that.
All right. Very well. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowick?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stedman?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
All right, very well. Let's move on to item number 5, please.
Excuse me.
I'm going to recuse myself.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, I'm going to recuse myself from item number 5. The city attorney has let me know that I can stay in the room and make a comment since this issue does impact me directly. I am going to, however, opt to leave the room completely and let you all do your work. So if someone can get me out of the hallway when you're completed, that would be great.
Yeah, exactly. Don't go through that door.
I won't. I learned, not that door. I watched when Adam did it, so thank you
Very
so
well.
much.
Item number 5, Business Activity Permit Policy Discussion. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive an update from staff on efforts with the business activity permit, specifically highlighting the kayak excursion operation permits, including the recent efforts of the Business Activity Permit Work Group, discuss potential options, and provide recommendations to staff.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, Commissioners, and members of the public. My name is Cesar Barrios, the Waterfront Business Manager. Today I will provide you with an update on an effort to revise the business activity permit policy, specifically highlighting the kayak excursion operator permits, including the recent efforts by the Business Activity Permit Work Group and staff, with the goal to receive input and direction from the Harbor Commission on a path forward. We'll begin with an introduction. In October 2022, Waterfront staff presented to Harbor Commission outlining challenges with the business activity permit, known as BAP, pertaining to the kayak excursion operations, primarily addressing congestion at the launch ramp, parking lot, and adjacent areas. Since then, the BAP work group was formed and several meetings have been held to address challenges and to find a solution. Today, the Waterfront staff seeks input from the Harbor Commission on proposed solutions and ideas to address the BAP policy challenges. Before we discuss the policy, let's go over some of the history. This policy was established in 1972 by the Harbor Commission, requiring any person engaging in a business or commercial activity within the Harbor District to obtain appropriate license or permit. The policy has not been updated since 2011. To date, the BAP program has proved successful in providing essential services to the harbor. Here you have a summary of meetings we've held over the years to address several BAP topics. The most recent in March 2023, where we met with the stakeholders interested in the kayak excursion BAP. And in addition, which is not noted here, it's that we've had at least two meetings with the BAP work group to discuss some of the details. Here you have a pie chart illustrating the number of BAPs in the respective categories. Today, the Waterfront Department oversees 66 activity permits. Of these, 56 are issued to businesses that provide direct services in the marinas, which comprise of boat washer, mechanics, and most services provided through the marina for boaters. While the others are comprised of boat charters, there's 8 of them, and the 2 kayak excursion operators. As it pertains to the kayak excursion operators, here you have an important portion of the policy we're currently reviewing. It illustrates some of the requirements to obtain a kayak excursion BAP. It is worth noting that the $250 fee will increase to $300 starting July 1st. This is recently approved by City Council. And this is just an inflationary adjustment and not necessarily a result of the BAP review process. Primarily, we're trying to cover cost of processing these permits. Following that section, Section 6 describes the requirements to submit logs to the Waterfront Department to determine levels of service and impacts the kayak excursions have on lease operations in the Santa Barbara Harbor. In recent years, those logs have not been submitted by BAP applicants. However, the Waterfront Department has not asked for them. This is something that we're going to start requiring this year. The renewal comes in August 1st, and I believe a lot of our BAPs have already contacted our department with the applications and so forth, but this is something we'd like to continue. We'd like to start doing again. At one point, we used to do this, and at one point, it just stopped. So I think this will provide essential information in determining impacts to the public space. Okay, so following months of discussions and meetings with the work group and stakeholders, we've discussed several challenges related to this policy. But there's still work to be done, and the Waterfront would like to address these main challenges during these discussions with the Harbor Commission to ensure the work we put into this moving forward is aligned with the interests of the whole commission. To address each point, number 1, the existing BAP policy language is over a decade old and it needs revision. Number 2, congestion in the parking lot, launch ramps, and adjacent waterways. Number 3, exclusive and indefinite access to BAP by only 2 operators. And I will go into detail on each of this. So now, how do we address these challenges? In this section, we're providing ideas and solutions discussed by staff, work group, and stakeholders. As mentioned, number 1, the existing BAP policy language is over a decade old in its revision. So on that regard, we need to align all BAP fees based on cost recovery. Some of them are fairly low. We just increased the service BAP from $20 to $50, and that's still a very economic fee. The Waterfront needs to update the BAP applications to align with each BAP category. Currently, 1 application is used for all BAP categories, and each category has their own specific requirement. And there's definitely a need to make this type of adjustment. Point number 2, congestion in the parking lot, launch ramps, and adjacent waterways. This has been the biggest challenge we're faced with this within the policy. So the waterfront is actively working with the Parks and Recreation Department to provide kayak excursion operators a location on West Beach to stage equipment and their larger groups, oftentimes up to 50 kayaks. The goal here is to provide space for kayak operators to conduct the business without impeding traffic and preventing public access. It is worth noting that this is an ongoing effort, and we thank the Parks Department for exploring this option. And just, it was not included in the staff report, but just yesterday we had a meeting with the Parks Manager where there are options available as soon as July 1st to implement this. And the Waterfront Department will be working closely with the existing operators if there's interest to do that. Next, staff with Harbor Commission direction to determine if operators permitted to use West Beach continue to hold a BAP, primarily to ensure that a larger setup on West Beach does not expand to the parking lot or launch ramps. The Waterfront is not opposed to having operators hold a West Beach permit and BAP at the same time, but the goal with this policy revision is to ensure that we don't promote or encourage congestion in the parking lot or waterways. And then Waterfront, along those lines, the Waterfront would like to actively monitor and enforce existing municipal code limiting the use of the launch ramps, which right now you get 30 minutes. That's just anybody. That's a boater that could be blocking the launch ramp or a walkway, SUPs, you name it. It's just an existing ordinance that it's in place, setting time limits for activities within the launch ramps and the parking lots. The overall objective is for business operators to police themselves, and by not blocking these public access areas for more than 30 minutes. And as I mentioned, this applies to everybody. And number 3, exclusive and indefinite access to BAP by only 2 operators. And currently, just for background, there are 2 operators by name in the policy that can conduct this type of activity. So if we have any new requests, there's no room for them to get a permit. On that regard, we would like to update the BAP policy to allow a total of 3 kayak excursion businesses and staff to assess impacts to the public space based on the frequency of use. Currently, there are only 2 permitted operators, but we would like to provide opportunity to others that may show interest in operating out of the Santa Barbara Harbor. We have a beautiful space, and we'd like to see other small businesses grow. Next point, it is not in the best interest of the current businesses and the city to have an individual operator listed by name in the policy. So on that regard, staff would like to recommend to have the business name listed instead of the actual name of the operator. This was a topic of discussion at the stakeholders meeting that received wide support from all sides, which makes sense from a business and liability perspective to both city and the business operators. The last one, BAP applicants to be reviewed and issued BAP on a first come and first served basis each August 1st, based on demand and impact staff to develop a wait list or multi-year rotating schedule if needed. Again, today we have not received requests for additional kayak operators to conduct business in the harbor. And just to conclude and to clarify as well, the Waterfront staff recommends that the Harbor Commission review the current BAP policy and consider proposed solutions to improve the permitting process with this BAP for the benefit of local businesses, the city, and the public we serve. Based on this direction, staff will continue to work with the BAP work group and stakeholders to draft a revised BAP policy for the Harbor Commission to review at the August or September meeting. With that, I'll be open to answer any questions or take any comments. Thanks.
Are there any public comments? Angela?
I have 2 speaker slips from people in the room, but I don't see anyone online with their hands raised at the moment. The speakers, Jamie Dimon and Michael Cohen, and there is 1 hand online now.
Good evening, Chair Stedman, Council, Commissioners, pardon me, at the wrong venue. I just would like to say I've appreciated the space that has been facilitated by Waterfront and the subcommittee or work group for us all to sit down and talk. I feel like our last meeting was the most productive we've had, and we all got to a pretty great place. I'd just like to say that myself and the manager at SB Adventure Co. have open lines of communication now. We're checking in, we're talking, and just trying to feel this out and figure it out. And I'm happy to see what was up there tonight. We want to support the businesses, but also in a way that doesn't impact negatively other businesses. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jamie.
Next speaker is Michael Cohen, followed by Kim Malloy online.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Michael Cohen. I operate Santa Barbara Adventure Company. I've come before you many times. I extend my gratitude for your valuable time dedicated to addressing this matter at hand, which we have all been diligently working towards resolving. I would like to express my appreciation to Caesar for meeting with me earlier the week, and I found that collectively we agreed upon much in March. And after meeting with Caesar, I feel that he followed up with me, and I'm optimistic we are on the right track. I'd like to acknowledge our exceptional staff who have just been awarded the 2023 Hospitality Business of the Year award by the South Coast Chamber. Just last week, we were awarded the top 5 kayaking outfitter in the nation by USA Today. I'm very proud of that, and go USA Today. My staff are the best in the business, and the goal every day is to ensure that we are supporting them and appreciating them for their talents. The business activity permit has always been for businesses with employees, and we've always provided a list of employees for that. So I think that was addressed in this presentation, that we're going to be able to continue that. As for the matter of launching on the ramp, it is important to recognize that the boat ramp offers the safest and most efficient means of launching kayaks. And often we're asking guests who provide varying abilities, such as small children or people with disabilities, to carry that heavy equipment. It can be very challenging. In May of last year, we voluntarily implemented a strategy to stage groups on the beach, effectively minimizing our time on the ramp. And since this change was put into effect, to the best of my knowledge, we have not received any complaints. I've personally spoken with our managers, emphasizing the importance of reducing time on the ramp. And I'd like to say that we've opened effective communication lines with James and Jamie Dimon at SB Landing to proactively address all potential issues. I maintain an optimistic outlook that we share a common desire for a peaceful and prosperous summer. Thank you for your time. I'm here for questions if anyone had any questions for me.
Thank you, Michael.
The next speaker is going to be Kim Malloy. Kim, it appears that you're self-muted at the moment.
Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you.
Yes, we can.
I just want to echo Jamie and Mike's comments that since our early March BAP work group meeting, I've been incredibly grateful for the communication and partnership that SB Landing and their occupants have shown. I've had conversations with Jamie, James, and Garrett regarding how we at Sebaco can improve our systems to all better coexist in this incredible city. And it's been immensely heartwarming and a reminder of the beauty that comes after difficult times. As the general manager at the Adventure Company, I put my trust in Caesar, the BAP work group that we are so grateful for the time they put and the patience. Thank you. And the Greater Harbor Department and Harbor Commission to continue to support the success of local small businesses, both those that are leaseholders and those who have business activity permits. I'm just looking forward to continuing to serve our harbor groups, which at Sebago, 70% of them are youth and high needs. So they're the people who need us. And historically, we are continuing to stay this season under less than a dozen days with more than 30 guests. And I just look so much forward. This is going to be our 25th season and our 20th in the harbor. And I just want to say thank you. I think we're walking into one of the best seasons with just a great community. And that is what Santa Barbara stands for. So thank you.
Okay, commissioners, any questions? Commissioner McCray.
Yes, this is for staff. Caesar, there was some question that was voiced in the BAP subcommittee working group at this point with respect to the use of a license versus a BAP. Is there any clarity on that?
Commissioner McCray, from my perspective, yeah, if we use a license, then we would provide a license for this business, for a business to operate within the launch ramp, and that the concern that we have with that is it could conflict with existing ordinance, which is a time limit perhaps. So, City Attorney Dormus, he left. So I understand the differences. The permit would just allow you to just provide us to use the space without a lot of constraints aside of a municipal code, which we currently have. And the license will be able to provide additional terms, but providing a license to operate at the launch ramp with the public space in the current time constraints, which is 30 minutes, it wouldn't be feasible for the launch ramp. It is a possibility for West Beach, but it appears that the Parks Department will have actually a permit type of a process as opposed to a license with this type of operators.
It definitely sounds like the BAP direction is the way to go for us. I just want to comment that it sounds like the BAP work group has had some really good benefit, and I'd like to see it continue to fruition before we, try to make any decision here.
Commissioner Anderson?
I just had one question on the second to last slide. You mentioned that the BAPs are an annually renewable permit, and that, I guess my question is, what would happen in the instance where we have these outfitters that have invested thousands of dollars in kayaks, and I'm sure they're planning on using them for more than just a year? If they weren't able to get their permit, are they concerned about that rotating 1 year tenure there, or has it just never been an issue because there's only 2 interested parties?
Commissioner Anderson, good question. So, yeah, I can't speak for the industry, but I would imagine there'll be a concern if they show up to renew their permit and then all of a sudden the 3 are taken. We haven't had a third operator come up to us requesting to operate a kayak business. Given the reason we're providing this third operator to provide a buffer per se, and then if we see demand, we would likely address that at that time.
How quickly can you make those adjustments? Does that have to go through a vetting process past you all, or is it just you guys saying, it looks like we've got 3 applications?
We would have to come back to the commission do a similar process we're doing right now. Likely for one item will be likely faster than what we're trying to do right now.
Thanks.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes, my comments are primarily process, and just as we talked about with the cruise ship subcommittee work group, that it needs to continue and finish its business. And what I'm arguing for is the BAP committee should also be allowed to finish its business, and all work groups should. I mean, I guess when John Doimus defended, I went over the videos of the February 16th meeting where we dissolved the committees, and there was extensive discussion not to diminish the stature of work groups, but in fact to make them more productive and efficient by freeing them of the hassle of the Brown Act. And that wasn't meant to disrupt the fact that the waterfront department asked us to do this job and make a recommendation on this policy. And that's all we think we should do. So, for example, we're in between the community and the department. And I think that's exactly what we're doing. And the reason why both sides of the dispute, if you will, said good things about the March meeting with stakeholders is because it happened. The original intent of the department was to bring an item to the full commission for approval without discussing it with the stakeholders. And now, because we resisted, the Business Activity Permit Committee resisted that and had the meeting with the stakeholders on both sides of the dispute, they both admitted tonight that they're starting to work together and they think we're headed in the right direction. So all I'm suggesting is, as chair, that we be allowed to finish that.
Very well. Are there any other questions from the commission? Does anybody want to offer a motion in connection with the item?
If one is necessary to continue the work of the Business Activity Permit Work Group, yes, I will make a motion to allow that to happen, and that a action not be taken to revise this policy formally until we have in fact finished our work and made a recommendation to the full commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanowik?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Chair Stedman?
Yes.
That's unanimous.
All right, very well. Director Wiltshire?
All right, 3 big topics in 2 hours. We're cruising. That's good. No, I'm serious.
We're still
it's a good
under
meeting. Yeah.
the over-under. 2.5.
Chair Stedman, my part will be fairly quick. I just have one topic tonight for the director's report. And this was really a request from last Harbor Commission meeting. So to recap on commission topics to date and how the information gathered in the prioritization workshop has been implemented. So this came from last meeting. Next slide. So just a little bit of basic framework. So a reminder that we really only have 10 Harbor Commission meetings per year. So there's a mix of required business and some voluntary business. The reality is we have limited bandwidth, both the commission and staff to tackle these efforts. And as mentioned before, public process always takes longer than everybody thinks. So for staff, something like the prioritization workshop was really important and helpful to kind of focus us on priority efforts throughout the year. It really takes a long time to see these through. Bigger policy efforts typically take multiple meetings, and so it's time consuming. January 24th, we had a prioritization workshop. A couple of the outcomes were we reduced budget updates from quarterly to biannually, which really kind of freed up more time for new business. We changed department updates to as needed, freeing up more time for new business. And we implemented and are currently using kind of a more efficient consent calendar. And we, as a group, ranked some of the higher priority policy efforts that we wanted to tackle, not only in this year, but in time to come. Next slide. You don't have to read all of this. The text is pretty small, but this is our kind of ongoing calendar of 2023. Obviously, we're in the June meeting, so everything up until that point has been completed. I color-coded these to break them down into items that were kind of typical Harbor Commission required business in green, and in blue are those items that were either identified in the priority setting workshop or kind of brought directly by the Harbor Commission. So just shows kind of the general mix. There really is a certain amount of business that we have to do, and then some time that we have to tackle these larger policy and additional items. Some of the notable items that we've covered so far this year and that were called out in the priority workshop. So Sustainability Department presentation, that ranked fairly high as a third-party presentation. We knocked that off. An update from CFSB, discussion on interacting with other boards, commercial fishing fee discussion. Tonight we had a city's emergency response and EOC discussion. That ranked high as a priority, possibly because it was in the throes of the emergency. And BAP policy discussion. So with 4 meetings remaining, we will continue with some of these main efforts. We've obviously gotten to some of our priorities, but not all. And so we're going to try and spend August, September, October, November dealing with some of these topics, knowing that there's some stuff still ongoing. We have further discussion with BAP, further discussion with cruise ships. These are really big topics. Next slide. And just a reminder to bring you guys back to January 24th. Here's one of the slides of the policy kind of higher level new business priorities. So we've been pretty active with some of these. So commercial fishing and BAP, those kind of rank up near the top. Vessel insurance policy still holding on that list. What we haven't bitten off directly is a discussion on waterfront leasing policy. That could possibly come as part of our 5-year review of leases, or as we finish up this business, prioritize that as the next. Slip assignment policy and slip transfer fees, we've kind of been involved in that for the past year or more, couple years, and so, but I think there's still work to be done there, and so that's why it was getting prioritized. Next slide. And with that, questions back to you. So just a really quick update on where we're at mid-year and what we've tackled to date and what we still have to come.
Commissioner Cohen, welcome back.
Thank you. I just want to say, Director Wilshire and I actually met to talk about I think it's our first item, which is the slip assignment and slip policy, and that was incredibly informative. Thank you so much. If you don't know about that issue, I suggest, obviously, there's a lot to learn there. I'm still learning, but I would really, it would be great to have some sort of presentation on that, or if people wanted to meet with you individually, I don't know how that works, but for me, that really helped me understand a lot of the issues within the harbor that maybe were coming to me from different people and I didn't know what they were talking about. So now I know what they're talking about. So I would like to see us try to address some of those issues at some point, but I think that, there's a lot there to digest.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, Commissioner Cohen. And based on last Harbor Commission and all of the information with commercial fishing policy and slip policy in general, we're planning to bring back in August just sort of an overview of the commercial fishing policy, just to kind of get a baseline for the entire Harbor Commission, and then the commission and the commercial fishing work group can kind of go from there. But it was pretty clear to let's get all the information out there and discuss it at this stage. So we were planning to do that at our next meeting, which is August.
Commissioner Nelson?
Are you suggesting that we just discontinue the slip policy assignment work group? Okay, so we want to, I guess that my point is that we should have a slip policy work group meeting.
I agree.
And perhaps we should have that before their presentation. I mean, that's, my concern is that we are diminishing the stature of the work groups by having presentations by staff.
I see.
And the issues, John, you're the chair of that group, the issues are pretty well defined on the SLIP policy group and what has to happen and who has to do it. And I think where we are is that we're going to have to do it, and that's consistent with what John Doimus said, is the committees are committee-driven, or work group-driven exercises, and that we lead them. And so that's my concern about commercial fishing policy, slip transfer policy. There are existing committees that are working on these. And to divert time from talking about the need for a business strategy or a master plan for the park, for something that the committees are working on, I just question the advisability
That's a good point.
of that.
You bring up a lot of very good points. I don't know what was the presentation going to be regarding, or it's a.
Yeah, and I think just as a reminder, Commissioner Nelson, I totally understand where you're coming from. To clarify, work groups aren't intended as decision-making bodies. So there's not all these siloed decision-making bodies off crafting policy, and they're information-gathering bodies. So there needs to be touch points back with the entire Harbor Commission. If that comes from this work group, that's great. If it comes from staff, that's fine. It just became clear to us as staff at last meeting that there needed to be some information conveyed about commercial fishing slip policies and the information that's there, so that even though the work group can go off and do it on their own in a silo, it would be nice to bring the entire commission up to kind of a baseline level of our existing policies, how we do it, how we enforce it, have Ms. Brzezinski come in and speak. She's really kind of a master on it all. So there was just a chance to share information.
That is not what occurred with the presentation you just made on the business activity permit process. The whole issue of using West Beach to alleviate the congestion as a possible solution that everybody grabbed hold of was presented at the stakeholder meeting, and what triggered it was Michael Cohen brought a memo that staff was not aware of or not familiar with, that basically where a previous waterfront director had in fact authorized the use of West Beach to address some problems and some opportunities.
Commissioner Nelson, I'd just like to avoid talking about a topic that an existing commissioner recused himself from, and now we're back onto it.
Okay, fair enough. Very well. Anyway, I guess my point is that these meetings are not just to bring up and talk about existing policy. What I worry about is they are characterizing the nature of the discussion and the work of the business activity group. And that's all I'm saying, that we need to have control of that discussion. And the way John Doimus presented it to us, for example, on the last time the SLIP policy assignment group, you're okay with that, made a presentation here, John Stedman, as the chair of that group, made the presentation, and you were staff on that recommendation. That was the way that thing unfolded, and that's the way I would like to see it unfold again when we do the unfinished business. And I guess I don't appreciate it when the work that we're doing, because you brought it to us as a problem that needs to be solved or addressed, or the council has, that suddenly we can't do it. For example, you know, what was said tonight on the cruise ship business was we want to put a little finer point on that. We want to do more work. Well, all I'm saying is if we spend a whole lot of time, council time, the year will be over. And on the SLIP policy group, which you're a member of, the issue right now is to do appraisals, or just to basically do appraisals to determine what the value of a slip is, or to do, you know, or to have the department work with the county assessor's office to do it. And so we can easily talk to an appraiser, we can easily talk to the county assessor's office, and we can come to a conclusion that we can recommend to the full commission. And that's what we had hoped would have occurred a year and a half ago, but it didn't. So I guess that's what I'm saying is let's take advantage of the benefits of a working group to get something done as opposed to spending a lot of time.
Yeah, so it sounds like maybe I'm remiss. I need to call a meeting of the slip assignment working group.
I just think that the agenda review is critically important.
Sure.
The Harbor Commission is a commission in and of its own, and John Doimus keeps saying that all the time. You know, you can do this, you can't tell us what to do. You can't tell us what to do, but you can tell the city council what's going on, the city council what's going on. So I just think that we need to acknowledge that in what we do, and we had some fairly big issues. It wasn't just about making when we had our prioritization workshop, looking at, you know, what are the directions that we would like to see the waterfront follow or go. And, you know, one of mine was the idea that we're probably the only port on the California coast right now that doesn't have a business strategy or a master plan. And that we ought to talk about that. And I don't see that anywhere in any of the boxes of the charts. So I guess that's my concern, is that with the time that's left in the year, I guess there's 4 meetings left, that we focus on some big issues and allow the working groups that we've empowered and impaneled to make recommendations.
And I think that scope is dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. As we're dealing with policy issues right now, at your direction, we have to bring BAP back, cruise ships back, so this is a workload. To the Harbor Commission, if we do not want to have an update on commercial fishing slip fee policy in August, we can remove that. So, but that is a commission decision, or you can present that to staff. But as of now, we are crafting our agenda based on what we're hearing from the commission.
Sure. Vice Chair?
You know, we appreciate the work and your passion in this, Commissioner Nelson, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that, you know, we can't dictate policy as a person or as a subcommittee or work group, right? It has to eventually come back to the whole commission. And I think, yeah, and I agree. And but in terms of what was happening, I think today in those touch points, I think that's you know, it's just to provide us a acknowledgement to the whole commission, kind of what's going forward. And I'm looking at the staff report right here, and I'm seeing right here it says, you know, making sure we're on the right track before investing additional time. And that's really all I see as in these things.
That's what you asked us to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think it's important just to acknowledge that, you know, that the whole commission has to dictate the policy going forward. And, you know, and in terms of what you're saying earlier with the work group, I agree. I think there's more power to the work group now because of the elimination of the Brown Act. So, I mean, technically, you know, we can work anytime we want and have.
So I guess if it was going to be let's take commercial fishing policy. Okay, so we made a presentation last week. There still is a hanging question. We approved unanimously that the department consider doing an analysis that would create more slips for the commercial fishing industry. And that was consistent with direction that we received from the city council on multiple occasions. So right now, I haven't heard from Director Wiltshire on whether or not they will have considered whether to do this or not. Because if they don't do it, my argument is that we're supposed to go to the council and say, they don't want to look at this. So I just need closure on these items, I would think, and I would hope you would as well.
Yep. No, I agree. Yeah. No, thanks.
That's all. And so with when they present the commercial fishing policy, it's not going to be anywhere near what we recommended. We recommended that you consider what would be necessary to create more slips. I'm assuming they're going to give you the history of that. I don't know. But the point is, whatever they present, they ought to run it by the work group, is what I'm trying to say before they present this. I learned all kinds of things today, and I won't go into them, about where we're going with the business activity permit. discussion, all kinds of things today. They were all new to me and new, and and I'm assuming new to you, Merritt, and you, John. And that's not the working relationship that the work group has. We were asked to solve that, help solve that problem. And now, today, we were not asked to help solve that problem. Here's what we're working on. Here's where we're going on the business activity permit, regardless of what you guys might think. And oh, by the way, here's what this group's been working on, as opposed to us actually having some degree of control over the narrative. And when you have presentations like you had today on the business activity report, we lose control of the narrative, and I would argue that we are marginalizing the strength or what a work group can accomplish. So enough of mine.
Commissioner Cohen?
I was just going to say two things. One is that, I think that it would be good to have the communication when there's topics that have a work group that's associated with it, that at least the chair of that group be able to approve or have that conversation. It sounds like that didn't happen in some cases. I don't know if that happened with the cruise ship report or not either. But I would hope that if you were going to be talking about the slips, that it was going to be informational. And I think that if we could have maybe some of that conversation, someone from the staff who's going to be doing that report to meet with either Commissioner Nelson or Commissioner Stedman, or I don't even know, are you the chair of the BAP?
Yeah.
Not BAP, I'm sorry, the SLIP committee.
Not
You're the chair. So Commissioner Stedman's the chair of the SLIP. So if there was some communication that happened so that there aren't these types of miscommunications that you're talking about, because it obviously that's a problem. But the other thing I was going to say is there, so I know we have another commissioner that's coming on soon. Is there another one that's coming on at the end of the year as well, or we don't know? Because I was just going to say the work group that we did, where we did the prioritization and the planning and all of that, I almost feel like we don't have to start over. We can just go to the items that we still haven't addressed here and continue that conversation. And I think it would be helpful for us, as you've tried to get going, to have some sort of strategic planning with regards to the year that we feel like we're involved in as a commission. And I think that we had a day or an afternoon that was really great, but it would be really good, and if we had some sort of work plan for the year or some sort of, so that we were aware of,
Back to. Yeah, Commissioner Cohen. Yeah, that was 100% our goal with the priority setting workshop. It's not new to us staff, the revolving nature of Harbor Commission. So new Harbor Commissioners come on. We've had 4, it's almost been fully replaced in the 4 or 5 years I've been here. Each commissioner brings their own desires, their own wants, their own needs, and so I totally get what you're saying. But as best we can for our year of ahead, and this is very dynamic, it moves, it shifts. I just edited this morning before this meeting. So yes, we can massage this, we can discuss what we want. Staff is trying to do the best they can to respond to what you all are saying, not individually saying, what you all are agreeing upon, and getting those items there. So staff is put in the position of treating all harbor commissioners as a unit. You guys make a decision as a board, as a commission, not as individuals. And so it becomes tricky when there's select commissioners off making decisions. So we just want to make sure that there is a reasonable and legitimate amount of touch points back to the full Harbor Commission so that the board can weigh in on if that direction is correct. That's all we're pushing for.
Very well. I don't see any other hands raised by the commission. So let's move on to item number 7, please.
Hello, Chairman Stedman and Commissioners and the public in general. My name is Brian Adair, Waterfront Facilities Manager. I'll be speaking about the Facilities Management Report. I want to talk to you about a contract for custodial services. Custodial services for the harbor restrooms and trash collection throughout the harbor. We are proposing, we are going to be renewing the contract with Momentum Work Incorporated. They're a nonprofit organization providing vocational and vocational rehabilitation. This is a 2-year contract after they've been serving for 32 years repeatedly. So the 2-year contract is for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. I did not put up numbers as far as what the cost was in 2023, but from my memory, it's very low. It's like plus or minus 2%. They also receive grant funding for coaching and supervising the employees that provide this wonderful service. And I had a wonderful opportunity to meet and speak to these employees, and a lot of them have been serving the waterfront for 5, 10, 15, 17, 20 years, and they're really a dedicated group on what they do, and they work really well with themselves and the community. Any questions on this contract? Next, I'd like to talk about waterfront projects. 2 of them will be Stearns Wharf Annual Heavy Timber Project and then dredging projects. For the annual Stearns Wharf Heavy Timber Project, this is done, we first do an annual assessment by our waterfront diver teams, and it's run by David Running, and they do a really good job, and they perform their job efficiently and safely, and we should be really proud of them. The second part of it, once we do the assessment, then we analyze what our priorities are, and then project is run by Nels Anderson to actually perform the project. And this year, we replaced 3,254 square feet of deck boards. We removed 29 piles. We driven 30 new piles, 32. And after the January storm, we identified 11 piles that were damaged due to this storm. So we did a change order and included those 11 piles. We replaced 16 linear feet of caps, which is a very low quantity, which is a good sign. I just want to share some numbers. The materials to save money with the Wiltshire's support, we buy all the materials in advance, and it usually takes about 6 to 9 months from start to end to order, receive, and get a contract and receive that materials. We store it at our Castete Street storage yard, and we go out to formal bidding process. And this year, again, Cushman Contracting had the lowest bid of $252,400, and then change order was for the storm piles, 11, and then there's additional costs for disposing of the debris. So a total cost of $537,556. So we try to minimize any impact to the retail, the tenants, and also minimize any impact to the tourism on Stearns Wharf. So some of the work is planned during the day, and some of it is planned during the evening to try to minimize that disruption. This is a diagram that's hard to see, but it's mapped out where we replace piles throughout Stearns Wharf, and so it's just not concentrated in one area. We try to hit the worst ones throughout the wharf. This is a diagram that depicts where we focused on replacing deck boards on Stearns Wharf. Any questions on this project?
Is that the 3,000 square feet that you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What's the average depth of those things go down? Do you hit something in particular you're looking for?
I've heard numbers, but I would have to look at the official project report to see how far each one went down, but I would say 15 to 20 feet would be my educated guess. Next, we'll be talking about dredging. So this spring cycle, we attempted to do several types of dredging. First was the Federal Channel, which was managed by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is funded by the federal government. And so they dredged 166,000 cubic yards of sediment out of the Federal Channel and displaced it onto East Beach. And the rough cost is $1.6 million. I didn't get a report from them to know the exact dollar amount, but I think we get just over $3 million a year for federal dredging. And this year we were trying to play catch up with the additional storm sediment that came in. So next we had the same company, Pacific Dredge between Marina One and the sand spit. I had to go out for a permit, and so I was limited on how much material I could dredge from there, but we capped it at 8,085 cubic yards at a cost of $95,000. This was we piggybacked on the contract that the U.S. Corps of Engineers had with Pacific Dredge, so we didn't go out to bid, but we piggybacked on them. That form of bid process met all of our requirements, our city's purchasing requirements. So luckily we were able to piggyback, and of course, not many people can bring an electric dredge into the harbor. So that worked out. The next thing that we did was try to dredge along the break wall on the north side by pumping it over the break wall, and our production wasn't as much as we hoped for. But the result was 80 cubic yards and a cost of $24,000. So that cost per cubic yard is very high, and we're going to find ways to make that more efficient and do more of it ourselves. So we're hoping to, one, pump more sediment as well as bring the cost down. The average cost for Pacific Dredge is like $8 per cubic yard. What it cost us was $300 per cubic yard. So, but if you did the math here, the Pacific Dredge cost averages $12 per cubic yard if you include their mobilization and demobilization charges and other charges. But so next fall, we'll try to dredge some more along the breakwater using a different technique and then be more efficient there and more productive. We also contracted Pacific Dredge to dredge on the west side of Harbor Restaurant on Stearns Wharf. Harbor Patrol is concerned about getting in there to fight fires on a low tide. But because of the January storm, there's a large sand berm between the Federal Channel and that location, and the dredge would have difficulty navigating through that sandbar and also being able to operate with minimum depth. And there was a storm swell coming in where it was unsafe for them to approach that during that time. Also, our permits were expiring. Our window of opportunity had come to an end. We had to close up shop and regroup for next fall. This is just a depiction of along the breakwater, how we pump the sediment over the breakwater. We close it for the public safety, and that's just a hose that goes over, and there's the sediment being pumped out the other side. Of course, we weren't as productive as we hoped, but we're very proud that we did something in-house, and they did this in-house before I worked here, and so this was a learning curve for me and understanding what we're doing and how we're doing it. This is a before and after picture. The Danny C. tugboat is assisting us. They have the hydraulic pump and generator on their vessel and using their crane to reposition the dredge pump. But before and after, we took a big bite out of that crown, and it helps promote better two-way traffic in the location. It's not ideal, but we're moving in the right direction. This is just a simple diagram for other people to know what the federal channel is. Those small boxes, as I believe, is a priority federal channel, and the 2R, 3R is if there is funding, then they pick away at those areas, and so that when new sediment comes in, it keeps like a reservoir, a place for it to go without choking off the federal channel. This is called a bathymetric survey. They use sonar to measure the depth of the harbor, and this is the inlet of the harbor. They do a pre-dredge survey, and then they do a post-dredge survey. So this is a survey completed after this most recent dredge cycle. And you can see in the boxes 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, that's all federal channel. As you come around the corner there between Marina 1 and the sand spit, you can see where they were biting into all that sediment in that area to promote traffic into the Marina 1 North Fairway. We ran out of production capability by our permit, so we had to stop there, and we also ran out of time to go further. Any questions?
Well, the money, we heard from the emergency management chief tonight that dredging costs were in fact eligible for reimbursement from FEMA. And so the issue was was those monies simply go back to the reserve, or would you be able to spend those monies on dredging that you wouldn't normally be able to do?
Mike, maybe.
Yeah, Commissioner Nelson, just to clarify, so the the federal channel is the responsibility of the Army Corps, and so they funded that. So they have funded the emergency dredging response for that.
So we didn't have any
Nothing
cost.
to do with it. It wasn't our money. But what Mr. Adair was saying is these ancillary areas, we did, and we racked up a fairly large bill, and we'll continue to rack up a bill. We did include those in our list for reimbursable funds, the portions that we dredged on our own. With respect to reserves and if we can spend the money, it's kind of the same thing. If it goes into our operating budget, any excess that's in our operating budget ends up in our reserves, so we can kind of play that how we want at our budget cycle.
Okay.
So the city has completed their damage inventory for FEMA, and it'll be presented to them. One of those line items is dredging, that we were impacted by the January storm, but we have to prove that that storm impacted us and where. So it's not a guaranteed that they'll reimburse us or how much, but we're doing our best to campaign for that because we were impacted, and this will help us tremendously.
Right, because the explanation that you and Eric gave during that was this was an unusual, even though we had these atmospheric rivers and cyclone bombs, it was the swell that basically did the real damage, which was something that I would think you can't prepare for. So you ought to be eligible to receive some funding for that, I guess.
Yeah, everyone believes that's so, and but it's a process, like they said, and we'll do our best to make sure that we educate and make people aware of the impacts of that storm. That concludes my presentation. If there's any other questions.
Commissioner
Those,
Anderson.
flagpoles look pretty cumbersome there on the breakwater for the hose. What was the approach you all used to, you want to go back to one of the pictures of the breakwater and the flagpoles? Yeah. So I assume that machine moved down the breakwater, and then every time you came into a flagpole, did you have to?
It's a very good, thank you for observing that. I didn't think about that technique of how to thread the needle around the poles, but based on our area and the length of that hose, I don't think we moved it very much. If we did move it, it was between 2 flagpoles and not beyond. But I appreciate you bringing it to my attention, because if we get a faster, heavier duty pump that can do more, we might have to do that and think about that, how to do that safely.
Oh, no,
thank
so
you.
that kind of stayed stationary in the.
I think it moved 10, 20 feet either way, but we didn't have to move it very far, because we didn't have to move it that far this time, because we ran out of time. It
And
wasn't.
then does pumping the sand on the other side of the breakwater move it back to the federal channel?
Yes, that's correct. yeah.
So
But it's not a complete circle. We get the sand there because there's cavities and passageways between the breakwater from the ocean side to the harbor side, and it, as a tide and the waves, it filters in there. About every 2 to 3 years, we have to go back and address it. We're looking at ways to fill those voids and cavities so we can minimize that infiltration. But once it gets down to the harbor entrance, then the dredge pumps it down to East Beach. But this is a different problem we're trying to address.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner McCray.
So, Mr. Adair, thank you very much. It's a great report, and thank you for all your work on this. You made some great progress, tried some things, learned some stuff. Super, super pleased. I'm glad to see that we took a bite out of that worst chunk alongside the breakwater. And we managed to get a bite out of that area that was restricted between the end of Marina 1 and the sand there as well. And good on you for getting that piggybacked in and saving a lot of effort and cost and so forth. That's really awesome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Right now, we're in the process of applying for another dredging permit where we can do some more inner harbor dredging, and that's a process again, but hopefully we'll do more next fall. Thank you.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Adair. I just want to comment on one of the first parts of the facilities manager report, the momentum work contract, really just because I'm in the harbor all the time, and I see these people, and I just wanted to say that I think personally they really do a fantastic job. They bring a real positive energy to the harbor, to everybody that is visiting and living there, the boat owners. They clean up all the waste in the morning from birds, the trash recycling. Multiple times a day I've seen them emptying the trash bins. They clean the bathrooms daily, but really just wanted to give a shout out and kudos to all those workers, because I think it's a great program.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Hey, any other questions from the commission? Public speakers?
We have one public speaker, Jamie Diamond.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Stanowik, for your comments about Momentum Works. I love seeing them every morning. The folks are so cheerful and happy, and they greet me every morning, and I greet them back, and it's a how are you doing? Anyways, they're really great people, and I love that we've been able to support this program for so long. I want to bring back up an issue that we kind of spoke about a while back as it pertains to the dredging, which is dredging planning, long-term and looking at the long game of it. Planning for knowing that we are going to have these ever-increasing, stronger storm surge events, and how do we plan for that properly ahead of time so it doesn't shut us down and prevent us from being safe harbor, from letting business be able to continue and commerce with commercial fishing. And so I hope that does stay in the forefront of the discussion, especially how we negotiate, or how you, I should say, negotiate during negotiations. How do you handle this? And so we don't miss a cycle opportunity, especially because it always ends up being in the fall when we're having our longest break from dredging and during those storms. I'd also like to say that the Harbor Merchants Association met for the first time in a while a couple days ago. Maybe it was yesterday, I can't remember. But new life is being breathed into that, and we're all really excited going forward. But there's a lot of big events coming to our area, not just the harbor. And there was a big concern about the restrooms with trying to bring in people to the harbor, the lack of restrooms, especially in the main harbor area, and how quickly they get just trashed, honestly. And it's not for lack of staff. I will stop. Leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you for respecting that 2 minutes. Are there any other public speakers?
There's no additional speakers.
Public comment, I should say. All right, moving on to commission and staff communications. Commissioner Cohen, anything?
I just wanted to let anyone know who might be watching that the National Park Service is seeking comments on a draft plan for accessibility and removing barriers for visitors with disabilities. The comment period has already started and ends on July 12th of 2023. I just think anytime we can work on accessibility, especially for, our disabled citizens within our community, we want to make sure that we do that. If somebody has any comments on that, the website is parkplanning.nps.gov/CHIS_SETP, and I'm sure it's also available if you just go to the National Park website. But I just wanted to pass that information along while we're here, because I think that's really important. I don't know if we've ever done at the harbor a accessibility report on those with disabilities. I just wanted to bring that up and make sure that we do that, and that we make sure that all of our citizens can enjoy the water.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson?
Nothing from me.
No specials at the, okay. Commissioner McCray?
I'm really curious as to what Jamie was going to finish up with, if she's willing to tell us.
Sure, you can speak to the commission.
So the Harbor Merchants Association, the feedback that I heard was, I think, really valid and very important as we want to bring in life into the harbor and enrich the businesses and the lives of everybody in the community as well. Not just, tourists are the lifeblood to some degree, but our communities directly surrounding the harbor is really important. So access to clean and handicapped accessible restrooms in the main harbor area is really important, and that they're able to be maintained in a timely manner. The bathrooms there specifically are probably the worst in the harbor. They're incredibly run down, and there was comment from one of the tenants that they can't even use it themselves. They have to go somewhere entirely else to use the restroom. It seems to be kind of at the either end of the harbor. So on the Santa Barbara Landing side, there is just those two restrooms over there. And most of the year, not so much an issue, but in the summer months and during holidays, it is. And I do recall hearing that maybe as part of the cruise ship program, the city or the waterfront was going to be buying those portable potties or something like that. I thought I had heard something about that. I don't know. But something that can be added to the area to make it easier, especially for people on the beach, on West Beach over there. That means there's only those two restrooms for everybody on that beach. So restrooms are kind of an issue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair?
No communication from me.
Commissioner Nelson?
I attended.
You have 2-minute limit.
Never make it. I'll never make it. I attended a meeting of the State Street Advisory Committee, which was really an eye-opening experience. It just is However, one of the things that might be of interest, there's all kinds of problems about whether or not it's park planning and what are the role of bikes or the absence of bikes, and that is going on. Well, the community planner for that effort, Tess Harper, made an announcement at that meeting saying that after solstice, she is going to be touching base with key commissions as part of her work on the master plan. I know we can't ask staff to do anything, so I'd be willing to do it. If the commission wanted to, we could literally make a request that the State Street planner come do a presentation for us. And a lot of the things we're talking about tonight in the recommendations of the cruise ship group, we're going to do a lot more outreach to businesses and how we can do a better job syncing with what goes on in town. What Jamie just said about more activities, the linkage between the harbor and State Street is there. And the general plan for the city
30 seconds.
says it's there. So I think we would benefit from a conversation with the Tess Harper and the State Street Advisory Committee. So if she could make a presentation here, that'd be a great thing. But the question is, how do we make that happen? If Waterfront Department would do that, that would be great. If not, I'd be happy to make that contact. So whatever the commission feels about that is great by me.
Excellent time management. You are right.
And he seats 2 seconds back.
I'll give those to you, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
All right. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Gaveling out.
Good news.